subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
The hot oil in the pan sizzled, and Shintaro and the others were sitting around the tatami. It wasn't that Shintaro and the others didn't help, but Kakashi himself offered to let them taste his skills. Therefore, the four could only watch Kakashi cooking in the kitchen. After all, he didn't need anyone to help him. Shintaro and Kurenai weren't too close to Obito and Rin because Kakashi was between them. So it was a bit awkward to sit together and say nothing. Rin broke the awkwardness this time and found a topic to ask. Kakashi, do you live alone? Obviously, this topic wasn't clever, only making Kakashi feel hurt. But this was clearly not Rin's intention, but rather a lack of understanding of Kakashi's situation. Even though she admired him, her understanding of Kakashi was not even as good as Obito's. Obito, who had been following Kakashi for a day, knew well that Kakashi lived alone, so he quickly changed the topic. That's right, the fishing earlier was very interesting. Rin also realized the mistake she had just made. After all, even though she didn't know Kakashi's situation, she had just heard it outside the window. After Obito finished speaking, he glanced at her quietly. Rin understood and followed Obito's topic. Ah, wow, that's nice. In fact, she hadn't clearly seen Kakashi fishing at that time because she was afraid if she got too close, Obito would notice her spying as well. Really, Kakashi closed his eyes, wondering what he was thinking. But the topic ended here because Shintaro came directly to the door and Kurenai followed him quietly, so she couldn't enter the topic. Fortunately, some people found a common topic. Kakashi, is there a difference between life as a ninja and life at school? Shintaro asked. This topic interested everyone except Kakashi. Everyone was still studying at the ninja school. Obito and Rin looked at Kakashi with longing, as if they wanted to hear about the life of a ninja, but Kurenai didn't seem too interested. When I become a ninja, you can't sit together with Shintaro every day unless I'm in the same class. This was what Kurenai thought in her heart. Kakashi's answer somewhat broke Obito and Rin's fantasies. Boring. Every time I catch a cat or dog. This made Obito very disappointed. He thought that after becoming a ninja, he would do great things every day. But after I became a Chunin, I did more missions and faced some dangers. As soon as Rin heard the word danger, she started to worry about Kakashi and said, "Will being a ninja be dangerous? It seems you have to be careful when doing missions." Kakashi felt warm in his heart when he heard Rin's concern and said reassuringly, "But it's okay. Generally, enemies will surrender when they see that we are from Konoha, unless they are enemies from the other 5 big villages. Even so, the captain and teammates doing the mission together will also prevent the mission's dangers. So there are only a few real battles. I have only fought enemies a few times so far." Kakashi's experience as a ninja far exceeded that of everyone present. After all, including the genius Uchiha Shintaro, none had officially become a ninja and basically had no experience. Therefore, when this topic came up, it was primarily Kakashi's topic, which also reflected Shintaro's skill in choosing topics. Since this was the Hitaki house, and the 4 people sitting here gathered because of Kakashi, it was natural that he needed to talk more. And Shintaro greatly needed Kakashi's ninja experience. After all, he only had 2 years left to graduate. In this way, the 4 of them chatted about the topic while waiting for Kakashi to finish cooking dinner. High-quality ingredients often only need the simplest cooking methods. After a busy day, Kakashi finally prepared the 3 fish, and the rice in the pot was also cooked. He brought the 3 fish to the table, and a rich aroma filled the air. Rin looked at the food in front of her and asked, "This?" "Fried river fish, Kakashi style." Kakashi answered the obvious question. The surface of the fish was fried to a golden brown, then sprinkled with fragrant ginger and garlic on top. Kakashi served rice to everyone. Everyone closed their eyes, clasped their hands, and said, "Itadekamasu." Then they all picked up their chopsticks and tasted Kakashi's skills. Rin led by taking a piece of tender white fish and putting it in her mouth. After tasting it carefully, she praised, "Kakashi, this is delicious. It tastes like the one in the shop." To verify Rin's statement, Obito immediately took a bite, then lifted his head with sparkling eyes. "It is indeed delicious. You're amazing." Really, Kakashi was quite calm, as if he had anticipated their reactions. Shintaro and Kurenai looked at each other after tasting it, and they both found it delicious. "Do you want to become a chef in the future?" Obito asked innocently. Kakashi showed his typical dead fish eyes and said, "How could that be?" Obito reacted and laughed. "All right." The whole room burst into cheerful laughter. The next day, Kakashi cleaned the big house alone as usual, then went out and said, "I'm going out to the empty house." He then went to the Konoha cemetery, where Tsukumo was buried like other ninjas who died in battle. Kakashi placed white flowers in front of the grave. "Dad, did you break the rules because of your friends?" "I also have friends, but I won't be like you. I will find a way to save my friends without breaking the rules. Even so, you're still my hero. Dad, I'll see you next time." 27. 2-year time skip 2 years later. Graduation from a ninja school was about to begin, and the students in the class were a mix of happy and sad. Most of the students were excited because they were about to become ninjas. Their 5-year career at the Ninja Academy was finally coming to an end. At last, they wouldn't have to listen to their homeroom teachers nagging or fear the occasional criticism from their teachers. But this only applied to those who weren't worried about the graduation exam. For those who were, this period was nothing short of a disaster. A prime example of this was Uchiha Obito. In the past 2 years, Obito still hadn't managed to shake off his reputation as the last in the class. His overall class ranking was on par with Guy. Obito was currently worried about the final exam. He had heard that this year's final exam would involve the clone technique. Originally, this wouldn't have been a difficult task, but he wasn't proficient in the clone technique. Although both Obito and Guy were considered the class's weakest students, their situations were different. Guy was seen as a special taijutsu recruit in his class, and his ninjutsu scores were always at the bottom, whereas Obito's ninjutsu scores were among the best in all subjects. The common ground between the two was their very low scores in cultural classes. Initially, of these two, one excelled in ninjutsu while the other excelled in taijutsu, but it seemed that Obito had a slight edge, and both had promising futures. However, when it came to the graduation exam, their situations were vastly different. Guy was always at the bottom in ninjutsu, so the school considered his special circumstances and exempted him from the ninjutsu exam. Obito, on the other hand, usually had good ninjutsu scores and was at least average in his class. Therefore, there was no reason to exempt him from the exam. This made him extremely anxious, to the point that he had to work overtime every day to practice. It had to be said that Obito's cramming was quite effective. After all, he would practice at the training ground even in the rain. Now Obito's fire release, great fireball technique, had reached Shintaro's level from 2 years ago. Not only were his shuriken techniques significantly improved, but he could at least hit the target. However, Obito's proficiency in the clone technique was something he had only just managed to grasp after much struggle. Facing the graduation exam at such a level made him feel very unsure. The reason Obito was so worried about the final exam was because he was discovered by Rin practicing in the rain. He had been thinking about it for a long time and suddenly remembered a helpful figure, Uchiha Shintaro. "Yes, Shintaro is a member of the Uchiha Clan. He can definitely help me." So Obito found him and explained his purpose for coming, and Shintaro did not refuse. At the training ground, Obito stood upright. Shintaro, in front of him, touched his chin and observed him. He scanned Obito's information with his 6 eyes. Although Obito's grades were poor, his strength wasn't. Though his physical abilities weren't as good as Guy's, he still had a solid foundation but lacked skills. In terms of ninjutsu, the amount of chakra forming the basis of his ninjutsu was quite large. Though the ninjutsu he mastered wasn't extensive, it was enough to tackle the graduation exam. Though Obito had only mastered the basics of Jinjutsu, the Jinjutsu subject in the graduation exam was essentially a written test, so there was no need to worry. From this perspective, Obito should be able to pass the exam. It was just that Obito didn't know what he was doing wrong, so Shintaro could only guide him symbolically. Obito had a good foundation, What needed to be trained was his skills. Your previous training methods were too sloppy. That's your weakness. Our next training will focus on specific skill training, Shintaro said. In terms of physical skills, he personally acted as a sparring partner, imparting his combat experience to Obito with punches and kicks, then letting him practice on his own while guiding him. In terms of ninjutsu, the process of performing the clone technique was optimized for him. The 6 eyes were used to examine the flow of chakra in Obito's body and provide continuous guidance. Obito felt that Shintaro was truly amazing. He could even direct the chakra flow in his body without any obstacles. His ability to perform the clone technique became much easier after following Shintaro's instructions. In fact, Obito's original level in the clone technique had already reached the standard, but his method of execution was too cumbersome. Shintaro merely pointed out a better way, and he felt he didn't help much, at most just giving a nudge. However, Obito was extremely grateful to him. To express his gratitude, he even treated him to a barbecue. It's worth noting that Obito's parents had long since passed away, his grandmother had died, and his family situation was far worse than Shintaro's, who could get support from Fugaku and Shinku. This barbecue meal cost Obito almost half a month's living expenses. Even inviting him to a barbecue wasn't enough. Obito patted his chest and said he still owed him. If Shintaro needed help in the future, he would assist without hesitation. Shintaro just laughed it off. After all, he thought he wouldn't need any help from Obito. However, he found this Uchiha before him to be truly special. Such a lively, cheerful, and carefree character was unique among the entire Uchiha clan. There were calm and composed individuals like him in the Uchiha clan, sly and cunning ones like Uchiha Kotetsu, quiet and dull ones like Uchiha Hamasu, and wise ones like Uchiha Fugaku. But there wasn't anyone as cheerful and lively as Obito, and the word cheerful seemed unrelated to the entire Uchiha clan. With Shintaro's help, Obito passed the graduation exam. However, on the day of the graduation ceremony, Obito was late because he was helping an old lady cross the street. He didn't even attend the class placement ceremony and the forehead protector handout after graduation. Fortunately, Rin was waiting outside the graduation ceremony. In the end, the teacher personally held a graduation ceremony for Obito. When Obito asked about the class placement after graduation, Rin lowered her head, making Obito think that he and Rin weren't on the same team, and his mood plummeted. As a result, Rin placed her hands on her hips and joked, "Unfortunately, we are on the same team." This made Obito instantly happy, and when he asked who the other teammate was, Rin gave a mysterious smile. At this time, Shintaro had also graduated and was sitting on the rooftop of a building with the Konoha forehead protector. The 2 people next to him were very familiar. One was Yuhi Kurenai, and the other was Sarutobi Asuma. Opposite the 3 of them was the Jonin in charge of Team 8, a man wearing a Jonin vest, his black hair tied up like a pineapple, and sporting a beard. There were 2 scars on the right side of the man's face, making him look a bit fierce, but his eyes reflected a shrewd and intelligent temperament. After carefully observing the 3 students in front of him, the man said, "Now let me introduce myself. I am your teacher, Nara Shikaku." 28. Becoming a Jonin. In fact, becoming a Jonin does not necessarily mean becoming a teacher. Being a Jonin is simply a job, indicating that one has the ability to lead a team of newly graduated Genin on missions. There is no mandatory requirement for Jonin to teach Genin, but this depends on a detailed analysis of specific situations. Most Jonin develop a sense of responsibility towards their Genin during missions and thus teach them their skills, which actually benefits mission execution. However, it is uncommon for a Jonin to treat Genin as students from the outset. There's a reason why Shikaku initially said that the 3 people in front of him were his students. This is because the identities of these 3 individuals are quite special. Uchiha Shintaro is the most dazzling genius in Konoha and the hope of the Uchiha clan, so he naturally needs Shikaku to take him seriously. Kurenai Yuhi is the only daughter of Kurenai Shinku. Shinku is Shikaku's senior Jonin. He is an instructor of Genin in Konoha, so he naturally has to take special care of his senior's daughter. Sarutobi Asuma is even more significant. His father is the professor of the ninja world, the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. Shikaku sighed inwardly. Truly troublesome. None of these three are easy to handle. However, as a jonin, he wouldn't easily reveal his inner thoughts. So Shikaku added, self-introductions should include your likes and skills, so you can get along better. Shintaro was the first to speak. My name is Uchiha Shintaro. I like eating barbecue and sweets. Fighting, hunting, and playing the shamisen are my three main joys in life. I am good at many things, and I can do a bit of everything. He had introduced himself this way when he entered school. Then Kurenai spoke second. My name is Yuhi Kurenai. As for food, I prefer seafood, especially octopus. I dislike cakes because they taste too greasy. I'm good at Jinjutsu. Finally, it was Asuma's turn. My surname is Sarutobi, and my given name is Asuma. What I like? I don't want to say. I am good at wind and fire attributes. Shikaku glanced at Asuma. It was clear that Asuma was in a bad mood, and their relationships weren't hard to see. Shintaro and Kurenai were obviously very close, while Asuma seemed a bit awkward around them. However, Shikaku didn't care about these details. He believed that after some time, the three people in front of him would get along well, or at least they would be much more harmonious. After all, human relationships aren't limited to romantic love, and some emotions are usually hidden after one matures. Shikaku now mainly analyzed the personality characteristics of the three people in front of him based on their few words during self-introduction. Uchiha Shintaro is mature and steady beyond his peers, but he has a kind of arrogance and madness in his heart. He is truly an outstanding young man. Yuhi Kurenai, she appears to be a good girl on the surface, but in fact, she is not as simple as she looks. Sarutobi Asuma, the young master of the Hokage family, has developed a difficult character. Fortunately, he is kind-hearted. He should be able to improve himself in the future. The Nara clan is rich in ninjas with high IQ, and Shikaku is the leader of the Nara clan. His ability to recognize people is very accurate. Then it's my turn to introduce myself. My name is Nara Shikaku. I like smoking and drinking. I like everything my wife makes, and I don't dare not like it. My hobby is playing shogi, and I am good at the secret arts of the Nara clan. The corner of Shintaro's mouth slightly lifted, and he thought, is a jonin also afraid of his wife? But the secret techniques of the clan are indeed intriguing. Techniques that can be passed down from generation to generation within a clan won't be weak. This clearly piqued his interest in the secret techniques mentioned by Shikaku, as he had never copied them. At that time, he mimicked the Hyuga clan's gentle fist with his 6 eyes. He was only afraid of being discovered, so he didn't dare use it fully, but it could still be integrated into his taijutsu, a great benefit for enhancing his strength. Shikaku obviously didn't know that the young man in front of him was already obsessed with his secret techniques. He slowly said, as usual, I will conduct an assessment of you. The assessment method is a real combat exercise, but it's already late, so let's fight another day. The group agreed on the time and place for the next day, and then returned to their respective homes. The next day, Shintaro first went to Yuhi's house, then went to the agreed place with Kurenai. Asuma arrived alone, slightly later than the two of them, but before the appointed time. Shikaku arrived at the agreed time and said, you are punctual. I like that. It was noon, and the training ground was empty, perfect for real combat. Shikaku got straight to the point and began to explain the rules of the exercise. Your mission this time is a protection type. As he spoke, he took out a small scarecrow from his pocket. Its craftsmanship was rough, and it looked like he had spent a few minutes randomly stabbing it. Shikaku narrated the background of the mission seriously. This is your client, Sakamoto Ichiro. He is a well-known wealthy businessman in the Land of Fire. This time, he went to the Land of Thunder alone to attend a meeting. Since there are many enemies, he came to Konoha to commission a protection mission, and the three of you will take on this mission. Shintaro listened carefully to the background made up by Shikaku with a serious expression on his face. Initially, Kurenai thought Shikaku's overly serious attitude was somewhat funny, but Shintaro's seriousness changed her attitude toward the exercise. Asuma always felt it was just an exercise and didn't need such detailed background setting. Shikaku handed the scarecrow in his hand to Shintaro and continued. Uchiha Shintaro, the captain of the three-person team, is currently responsible for the client's personal protection. You have arrived in the Land of Thunder, just a few hundred meters from the agreed town to complete the task. Shikaku pointed to a forest in the middle of the training ground and said, "Through that forest, you can see a river. Cross the river, and that's your destination." It should be noted that the Land of Thunder has many gorges and mountains. There are towering mountains on both sides of the forest in front of you. Since the client is afraid of heights, we can't take him around the forest on either side. Current intelligence indicates that there may be enemies in the forest, so extreme caution is required when passing through. Now the client feels tired and requests a 15-minute rest. After 15 minutes, we will immediately depart to escort the client. Reaching the destination is considered a success. After Shikaku finished speaking, he walked into the forest and disappeared, leaving Shintaro and the others waiting silently. 29. This doesn't seem like acting. 15 minutes later, Shintaro put the scarecrow in his coat pocket and stood up, saying, 15 minutes are up. The client has regained his strength. Let's go now. Kurenai immediately stood up cooperatively, and Shintaro glanced at Asuma. They exchanged looks for a moment, then finally placed their hands on their knees and stood up from the ground. Shintaro nodded in satisfaction and said, "Great, let's move out." They took steps and walked into the forest. As soon as they entered the forest, Shintaro immediately signaled them to slow down and said, "I sense danger in the forest. Form up to protect the client." In an escort mission, the client's life is the most important. They gathered, with Shintaro leading at the front and the scarecrow, the client, Sakamoto Ichiro, behind him. Next to Ichiro were the other two ninjas, Kurenai and Asuma. The three of them surrounded him. Ichiro followed the three-person offensive formation in the middle without showing any flaws, allowing them to move forward quickly while ensuring safety. At this moment, a kunai suddenly flew from the canopy of trees ahead, targeting the open space surrounded by the three of them. In theory, that's where the client stood. If the kunai indeed hit the three in the middle, the client would be struck. Since it was unclear whether the kunai was poisoned, being hit could be fatal. Shikaku could have jumped out and declared that the escort had failed this time because the kunai was very poisonous, so the three did not dare to ignore it at all. Asuma drew two unusual tiger-shaped blades, a gift he received when he officially became a ninja. They were short knives made by the third Hokage using chakra metal and hard alloy. Chakra metal was very expensive, and the third Hokage's finances could only mix a small amount of chakra metal into them, but that was enough. These weapons could absorb the user's chakra and exhibit chakra attribute combat characteristics. Asuma rushed forward, punched, and deflected the kunai, then quickly dashed into the forest, heading to where the kunai was launched. He was strong enough to rank among the top three in his class. He was swift and incredibly strong. He leaped and directly reached the tree where the kunai was just launched. He infused chakra into the short knives and punched. The wind from his fist, accompanied by the cold light from the chakra blades, uprooted the tree in one go. In an instant, leaves danced wildly and fell all over the ground, but Shikaku was not there. Only a simple launcher was visible. Asuma was slightly surprised but still pressed the launcher, finally jumping out and saying to Shintaro, "Sensei is not up there." Shintaro already knew the result and said, "No problem. Keep vigilant and return to formation." Asuma nodded and returned to his original position. This forest was only about 200 meters deep. It was easy to traverse these 200 meters, even while carrying a client. But the problem was they knew that traps like this were set by Shikaku in this forest. Moreover, he himself didn't know when he would appear, so the three of them moved more steadily, almost at the speed of an ordinary walk. The three of them advanced step by step, very cautiously. Sure enough, they encountered several such traps along the way, and the three of them resolved them one by one. The little tricks along the way made Asuma let down his guard. The three had already walked halfway and might soon leave. But just as Asuma thought of this, Shikaku caught him off guard. This time, Only a kunai was seen flying toward them. Asuma rushed forward without thinking, preparing to counter it with his chakra blades. But he didn't expect that this time the kunai had an explosive tag attached to it, and the tag was already ignited. He was already halfway through his rush before he saw the explosive tag, but it was too difficult to change his movement now. As he rushed toward the kunai also quickly approached him. When two forces move toward each other, they collide in an instant. At such a time, there wasn't enough time to change actions. Asuma could only prepare to knock the kunai away with one blow, to strike it as far as possible before it exploded. But the risk was very high, as the explosive tag could detonate upon impact. But there was nothing else to be done about it. At this moment, a kunai flew past him and hit the explosive tag on the kunai in front of him. The two kunai collided, altering their trajectory, causing the kunai to fly to the side and get stuck in a tree beside Asuma. With a loud explosion, the tree was blown to pieces by the explosive tag. The fragments of wood and dust from the explosion, along with the shockwave, knocked Asuma to the ground. It was Shintaro who threw this kunai and saved Asuma's life. He had long noticed the explosive tag kunai with his 6 eyes and sighed inwardly. Nara Shikaku is very bold. Isn't he afraid of blowing the Hokage's son to death? But he might have observed what I just used. The kunai's action triggering the hidden weapon mechanism made him think I could save Asuma, but it also shows his courage. Shikaku walked out from the shadows of the forest and said to everyone, "Hand over the client and you will be safe." Shintaro responded, "Absolutely impossible. Not betraying the client is our Konoha ninja motto." Shikaku put on a fierce expression in a very amusing way. Even the scar on his face twitched twice, and he said harshly, "Then don't blame me for being rude." He raised his hand and threw numerous shuriken, unexpectedly covering Asuma, Shintaro, Kurenai, and the client in 4 directions simultaneously. Asuma rolled on the ground, narrowly avoiding the attack. Shintaro alone blocked the shuriken flying toward Kurenai and the client in front of him, and at the same time said to Kurenai, "Kurenai, protect yourself and the client." He then took out 2 shuriken from his ninja tool bag and threw them at Shikaku. Shikaku dodged to the side, but Shintaro had tied invisible wire to the shuriken, controlling the shuriken to chase after Shikaku. Seeing it was difficult to dodge, Shikaku took out his kunai and knocked down both shuriken. "Wire shuriken? Are you from the Uchiha?" Shikaku exclaimed. Shintaro replied, "Knowing that I am from the Uchiha Clan, do you still dare to take action?" Shikaku laughed and said, "Uchiha boys are worth a lot of money at the exchange." To this, Shintaro commented, "This doesn't seem like acting. I suggest a thorough investigation." 30. Kageme no Jutsu. Shintaro didn't continue his attack on Shikaku, but instead pulled out kunai and shuriken from his ninja pouch and launched them forward. These were 2 large swords. When Shikaku dodged these 2 attacks and was in the middle of his evasion, Shintaro once again used thin strings to pull the kunai and shuriken, making them spin and return. The shuriken attacked Shikaku from behind. This was Shuriken no Jutsu. This is a C-rank ninjutsu passed down through generations by the Uchiha clan. By simply using basic ninja tools and special wire, it can achieve an unexpected victory. This technique originally required the inside of the Sharingan, but Shintaro had the 6 eyes, which could substitute for the Sharingan, allowing him to master this technique proficiently. The back of Shikaku's head was pierced by the shuriken, but then he vanished, transforming into a pile of wood. This was Kawarimi no Jutsu. Shikaku had already run to the nearest tree to hide, but this didn't escape Shintaro's sight. He fired all the remaining shuriken in his ninja pouch, covering a wide area where Shikaku was hiding. This wasn't the end. He formed seals with his hands, then spat out fireballs to engulf the shuriken. Katan, Senka no Jutsu. The flames enveloped many kunai, attacking Shikaku. Not only was it very powerful, but it also obstructed his view and disrupted his movements. This technique had the deadly fire element at high temperatures and the cutting power of the shuriken. It could be described as a dual effect. This was a B-rank technique from the Uchiha clan mastered by Jonin-level ninjas. However, it seemed understandable for the genius ninja Shintaro to know B-rank ninjutsu after graduation. Yet this level was still not a threat to Shikaku, who was already a Jonin. The seemingly overwhelming attack didn't panic him at all. He formed seals with his hands, and his shadow completely separated from his body and transformed into a physical entity. Kageme no Jutsu. The shadow stood in front of Shikaku and extended forward, blocking most of the fiery shuriken attacks. Moreover, the shadow passed through the holes in the shuriken, throwing back the original number of shuriken to attack Kurenai and the client. Your move is very strong, but although the shuriken enhances the ninjutsu's power, it also adds a weakness, making the original fire entity easier to counter. Shintaro used Doton, Dorihiki, to form an earth wall behind him, helping Kurenai block the shuriken attack. At the same time, he paid attention to Shikaku's words and sighed. Of course, Jonin have a better understanding of ninjutsu than I do. He realized the gap between himself and a Jonin. At this moment, Asuma recovered from the earlier attack, and when Shikaku wasn't paying attention, he dashed forward in an instant, infusing chakra into a short sword and punching the opponent's chest. But at that moment, his movements suddenly halted. Asuma's face looked fierce, and he couldn't move no matter how hard he tried to break free. Kageme no Jutsu of the Nara clan. Shintaro recalled the name of this technique in his mind. After learning that the Jonin was from the Nara clan yesterday, Shintaro and Kurenai met with Shinku to ask for information about the Nara clan. Both of them learned that most of the Nara clan's secret arts relied on shadows as a medium to control the enemy. Therefore, Shintaro had long been wary of this move, but he didn't expect Asuma to be so impulsive and fall into the trap. In fact, Asuma might not have disregarded the Nara clan's Kageme no Jutsu, but his character was still unstable. Seeing Shikaku talking with Shintaro, he thought the other party had a weakness, so he forgot about this ninjutsu and rushed in impulsively, only to end up being controlled. Shikaku smiled and moved his wrist, and Asuma's wrist moved uncontrollably. Give up struggling. With your current strength, it's no problem for me to control you for half an hour. Shikaku punched the air several times, and Asuma's body, also holding the chakra short sword tightly, swung it forward with powerful punches. Shikaku then infused his chakra into his fist, and Asuma could only pour his chakra into his fist, along with the chakra short sword. After moving a few times, he got used to Asuma's body. At this moment, Shintaro was already in front of Asuma. Kageme no Jutsu requires hand seals to be used, and if the seals are formed, its weakness becomes apparent, so Shintaro wasn't too afraid of this technique now. That's why he dared to approach. Shikaku controlled Asuma to launch a fierce attack, and Shintaro didn't hold any ninja tools, so he couldn't fight back at all and could only dodge repeatedly. However, even under Shikaku's control, Asuma's strength was superior to his own, but he still couldn't touch a hair on Shintaro. While dodging Asuma's attacks, Shintaro extended his hand to continuously strike Asuma's body. Shikaku initially didn't care, because the pain of someone controlled by Kageme no Jutsu wouldn't return to him. It was hard for Asuma, being controlled and beaten by his teammate. But soon Shikaku realized something was wrong. It became increasingly difficult to control Kageme no Jutsu, and Asuma's movements became more uncooperative. He was very surprised, but he already understood that it was Shintaro's actions just now. In fact, Shintaro once again applied Gentle Fist. The earlier moves were all aimed at the points where Asuma moved his chakra. The chakra flow in Asuma's body was blocked, and Shikaku's control over Asuma was naturally hindered. After the fight, Shintaro fully sealed the chakra in Asuma's body, cutting off the ninjutsu effect of Kageme no Jutsu. Asuma suddenly fainted. Because of the continuous blows he just received from Shintaro and the fact that the chakra in his body was completely sealed, coupled with the side effects of Kageme no Jutsu, he instantly became weak. Shintaro hugged Asuma, then returned to Kurenai, laying him, who was limp, on the ground, and asked Kurenai to watch over Asuma. Seeing her nod seriously, Shintaro continued to fight Shikaku. Shikaku said, "You're the first person I've ever seen who broke Kagemain no Jutsu like this. What method did you use? Can you tell me?" Shintaro replied, "All right, let's talk later." Seeing that he didn't want to answer, Shikaku didn't force him, and the two continued fighting. Katan, Geiki no Jutsu. A high-temperature fireball shot into the air, almost as big as the entire tree canopy, and seemed to be at least 4 or 5 meters in diameter. Such a huge fireball startled him, and Shikaku was forced to retreat to the ground to avoid disaster. The tree crown that was just hit and the vast forest behind it were all ablaze. Kuro Higanbana. Shikaku struck the ground with his hand seal, instantly causing his shadow to spread in all directions, forming a complex pattern like a lily flower. This pattern was a taboo not to be touched. Once touched, it would control the opponent's body. Shintaro stepped back repeatedly, complaining in his heart. Geiki no Jutsu is strong enough, but it can't cause any damage. Another secret shadow technique? It seems very different from the principles of ordinary ninjutsu. The six eyes analysis still requires time. His eyes emitted a crystal blue light, and the six eyes were in effect. 31. Evaluation. Shikaku noticed the change in Shintaro's eyes and thought, "This child's eyes are strange. Does the Uchiha clan have another type of eye besides the Sharingan?" He was an intelligent person. He recalled that when the other party broke Kagemain no Jutsu earlier, the other party's eyes shone at that moment. But Shintaro's eyes didn't usually shine that brightly. This subtle nuance was sharply captured by him. However, Shikaku understood that everyone has their own secrets, so he did not intend to delve into it. There were many shadows under the forest, which could be considered his domain. Kuro Higanbana continued to spread along those shadows. The shadows moved very quickly and kept attacking. Shintaro had no choice but to dodge and jump around within the forest. You may not know that the Nara clan has been breeding deer for generations. The movements of the deer are as sensitive as yours. We discovered the original Kagemain no Jutsu to gather antlers without harming the deer. In a shadow-filled forest, I can paralyze an entire herd of deer in one move, allowing anyone to collect their antlers. You are just one of the deer in my eyes. Surrender the struggle. Shikaku tried to use words to shake his opponent, but Shintaro was unmoved, instead talking about deer hunting with great interest. What's the point of hunting without blood? If it were me, I would burn the whole herd. Not only could I get the antlers, but I could also eat barbecue. Shintaro expressed his opinion while fleeing. Shikaku pursed his lips and said, "You rascal, how can you treat them so harshly? Besides, deer hide is also a valuable resource. Burning it like this is just wasting resources." Rarely do two people seriously discuss how to deal with deer during a battle. Although the two argued verbally, they both had very high regard for each other in their hearts. Shintaro believed that the man in front of him was not only stronger than him, but also had something he could learn from in terms of fighting methods and ninjutsu understanding. Shikaku believed that the young man jumping around the forest was the epitome of a genius ninja. With excellent shuriken skills, fire element, and taijutsu, he could be considered a perfect Uchiha Clan ninja. Coupled with intelligence far exceeding the average person, Shintaro fully possessed the strength of a Chunin or higher. In Shikaku's view, although Shintaro did not have the firepower compared to a Jonin, his strength had surpassed most of the Chunin in the village. If using a professional title to gauge his strength, the most appropriate title would be Special Jonin. Special Jonin is a professional title between Chunin and Jonin. It is generally given to ninjas who are stronger than Chunin or have special talents, but their overall strength is not as good as Jonin. Shintaro perfectly met these criteria. This made Shikaku sigh. He is only 9 years old. His talent is truly astonishing. If he continues to train for a few more years, he might already have the strength of a Jonin. What a pity. He's an Uchiha. He had so many thoughts for a while that he got lost in them during the battle. Shintaro noticed that the speed of the shadows controlled by the other party had slowed down. Although confused, he also knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So he kept running around the forest, the blue light in his eyes flashing continuously, as if looking for something in the forest. By the time Shikaku came to his senses, Shintaro had already run to the edge of the forest, and he unconsciously chose to pursue him. Shintaro reached the edge of the forest and quickly formed seals with his hands, slapping the ground. Doton, Dorikatsu. When Shikaku arrived at the scene, he saw a large, deep crack diagonally cutting across the open space outside the forest. His intuition told him that this was clearly not happening randomly, and he felt a bit uneasy. However, Shintaro was already running in the opposite direction. Shikaku had no time to think and had no choice but to chase him. He sighed inwardly. What is this kid going to do? And why did his speed suddenly increase? In fact, to avoid being caught, Shintaro used cursed energy, and the blessing of chakra made him even surpass Shikaku, a jonin, for a short time. Shikaku never doubted his life, feeling that he lacked training recently and could not win against a youngster who had just graduated. Soon, Shintaro came to the other side of the forest and made the same move. At this time, Shikaku already had his own speculation in mind, feeling something bad, and thought, is this kid going to... This time, Shintaro came back and grabbed Kurenai to stop her from moving. Then he slapped his hands on the ground with hand seals. Doton, Dorihiki, 4 earth walls emerged from the back, left, right, and top. In addition to the earth wall in front that was initially used to help Kurenai block the shuriken, 5 thick earth walls formed. Boom! 2 explosions sounded in the distance, and Shikaku had just arrived in front of the wall. Shintaro watched him from outside and shouted loudly, "Enemies outside, listen up. Now the mountains on both sides have collapsed, and you are now dead." His voice became very muffled after passing through the earth wall. Only then did Shikaku fully understand what the other party had just done. It turned out that while Shintaro was escaping, he took the opportunity to restore the explosive tag traps that Shikaku had placed throughout the forest, then made cracks on both sides of the mountain to plant the explosive tags inside, causing the mountains on both sides to collapse. Shikaku was amazed by Shintaro's intelligence, but he didn't expect the background information he created to confine the 3 of them would ultimately lead to his death in the canyon. He raised his hands helplessly and said, "Ah, I'm dead." Shintaro then used lightning element ninjutsu to blow up the walls, and together with Kurenai, he diligently led the client and Asuma through the forest and across the river, successfully completing the mission. At this moment, Shikaku arrived, clapping his hands and saying, "Congratulations on successfully passing this actual combat training." Kurenai cheered with joy on her face and took the initiative to high-five. Shintaro responded with a smile, and at the same time looked at Shikaku as if waiting for his praise. Shikaku rolled his eyes and thought, this kid, despite being so capable, is still just a child. He said, "Although you all passed the test, my evaluation of each of you differs. The one with the lowest rating is Asuma. Your strength is up to standard, but you are too careless. You also paid the price for your impulsiveness. I hope you will remember this lesson in the future." Asuma had just sat down. Although he was reluctant to hear this comment, he couldn't refute it and could only clench his fist silently. Second in line is Yuhi Kurenai. Although you didn't show your strength this time, it was because you stayed by the clients and injured Asuma's side that the mission didn't fail. This shows that you can remain calm, value your companions, and will not compete with them for credit. This is a very valuable quality in a mission. Kurenai was naturally happy to be praised, and the corners of her mouth unconsciously lifted, but she still pretended to be humble and said, "I still have to keep learning." Shikaku waved his hand and continued, "Finally, Uchiha Shintaro rated highest in this evaluation. In terms of overall strength, it can be judged at the level of special jonin, even slightly higher. The most important thing is having a prime mind. You can rescue and guard your companions in battle, and at the same time, you can formulate the best battle plan based on existing conditions and intelligence. The success of this mission is largely due to Uchiha Shintaro." 32. Team 7 and Team 8 Shintaro's ever-smiling expression made Shikaku feel as if he were being mocked, suggesting that as a jonin, he had been fooled by a genin. He grew angrier as he thought about it, then changed the subject and began, "Even though your mission was successful, it doesn't mean your performance was flawless. Firstly, your formation is still unstable. A simple kunai trap from me disrupted it. If I had taken the opportunity to kill your client then, the mission would have ended. Secondly, your power isn't concentrated. Asuma and Shintaro took turns handling offensive duties, while only Kurenai guarded. If the enemy had more people or stronger forces, it would have been easy for them. Finally, Shintaro's battle plan was unstable. First of all, the mountains on either side weren't necessarily the type that could be blown up with explosive tags. Moreover, even if the explosion succeeded, your enemy might not be wiped out by the collapsing mountain. For instance, I could have used Kagemain no Jutsu to shield myself in shadows. If it were another ninja skilled in defensive ninjutsu, they too could survive the collapse. Shikaku's pointed out shortcomings that might seem picky, but they were indeed accurate and well-founded. Therefore, Shintaro nodded in agreement. Seeing this, Shikaku felt satisfied and said, "All right, you've worked hard for the test. Now I'll treat you to something to eat. What would you like?" Asuma replied softly, "I don't mind." So Shikaku looked at Shintaro and Kurenai. Kurenai pointed at Shintaro with a smile and said, "He definitely wants to eat barbecue again." Shintaro admitted honestly, "I have a few ideas." Shikaku took out his wallet, inspected it carefully, and said, "Barbecue. All right, let's have barbecue." Shintaro sensed a hint of reluctance in his tone and teased, "Does that mean even jonin are in a pinch?" Shikaku awkwardly touched the beard on his chin and said, "It's just that my salary is controlled by my wife, but I should still be able to manage a barbecue meal." Perhaps this was the tragedy and stubbornness of an adult man. Barbecue Q. This restaurant had been open in Konoha for several years and had grown more popular. Luckily, the four of them arrived early, so there were still seats available. Shikaku entered the store and was warmly greeted by the waiter. "Hello. Table for four?" He nodded. The waiter was about to lead them to a seat, but Shikaku pointed in a direction and said, "No, we can sit over there." Kurenai looked in the direction Shikaku pointed and saw a familiar figure with yellow hair. Kurenai asked hesitantly, "Shintaro, isn't that?" Shintaro nodded with a smile and replied, "You're right. That's Namikaze Minato." Namikaze Minato. Asuma lifted his head upon hearing the name. He often heard his father mention this name, praising him highly. Seeing Minato, Shikaku chose to sit there. He walked over with Shintaro and the others. Naturally, Minato noticed Shikaku and greeted him with a bright smile. "Long time no see, Shikaku. Oh, are these your students?" He greeted Shintaro and the others, a bit surprised to see Shintaro and Kurenai among them. Shikaku said, "Yes, these three are not easy to handle." Minato laughed and invited Shikaku and the others to sit at the table next to them. Shintaro noticed that the three people with Minato were Kakashi, Obito, and Rin, and sighed internally. As expected, class assignments and other things have been arranged. It's not all fate. Although Kakashi was a Chunin, he was transferred back to form Team 7 with Obito and Rin due to various reasons, such as age and experience. Kakashi and the others also greeted Shintaro and Kurenai when they saw them. The people at both tables were colleagues and classmates, and since today was their first team building, the atmosphere between them could be lively. However, Shintaro initially didn't care about the atmosphere. He only cared about whether he ordered barbecue and whether the toppings contained sugar. "Did you also have training today?" Minato asked curiously. It was his first time being a teacher, and he had little experience, so he wanted to know how other jonin did it. Shikaku glanced at Minato, feeling that this jonin was somewhat naive. Of course, the first day of forming a team involved training to get acquainted. Nevertheless, he detailed the training they had today. "Yes, we simulated an escort mission, and I acted as the enemy." Minato was immediately interested and asked, "Oh? How exactly does it work?" "I only know the bell-grabbing exercise, which I learned from Jiraiya-sensei." "Haha, it's nothing. I just used a scarecrow as the client and asked the three of them to escort it." But Shintaro's performance was quite interesting. Shikaku explained today's escort training in detail. Minato was intrigued upon hearing it and praised Shikaku's idea and the three's performance in the training. Obito, sitting beside Minato, heard about the next class's escort task and sighed enviously. Escort training sounds fun. It's not like our class where 3 people compete for bells, but in the end, we can't even touch Minato-sensei. Hearing this, Minato scratched his cheek in embarrassment and laughed a few times. Rin agreed with Obito's viewpoint, as the 3 of them were still too young to compete with Minato at their current level, so they were bound to fail when trying to grab the bells. Kakashi didn't pay attention to this. His focus was on Shintaro's performance in Shikaku's narration. After hearing Shintaro praised highly by both Shikaku and Minato, Kakashi felt competitive again. He thought to himself, I am still a Chunin, but Shintaro has been recognized as a special Jonin by both Shikaku and Minato-sensei. It seems I'm falling behind again. Kakashi held his father's white, fanged tanto, and the stubborn look in his eyes made others feel heartbroken. Seeing Kakashi sitting in the back, Asuma felt a slight comfort in his heart. Even Kakashi can't compare to Uchiha Shintaro. Perhaps, in his heart, being born in the same era as Shintaro was a tragedy. The culprit, Shintaro, was running to the kitchen to ask for a can of sugar. When he returned, he noticed Asuma and Kakashi were in a bad mood and felt a bit puzzled. But soon, the aroma of barbecue made him forget the matter. Grilled meat dipped in sugar was Shintaro's favorite way to eat it. After a good meal, Shikaku's wallet suddenly deflated, and he went home feeling worried. Asuma also went home alone, and Shintaro also returned home after escorting Kurenai. At dusk, Shintaro came to his yard. A black crow was perched at the door, turning to look at him curiously. Shintaro used the 6 eyes to confirm that the crow was just an ordinary crow, not a summoning animal or anything. So he formed a special seal with his hands, and the shadow beneath him immediately showed black lines, merging with the crow's shadow. The crow's figure was instantly imprisoned. Got it. The 6 eyes completed the analysis of Kagemain no Jutsu and found that the chakra attribute used in this secret technique was not one of the usual 5 attributes, but rather a special chakra containing pure spiritual power. It would take others years to learn it, even if they knew the principle. But Shintaro was different. Cursed energy was pure spiritual power. That's right, the Kagemain no Jutsu he used earlier was not the genuine one. Shintaro hadn't mastered the Y element yet. It was just a magically modified version of Kagemain no Jutsu, using cursed energy. Shadows. Cursed techniques. Why do I feel disgusted by the combination of these 2 things? There was a strange emotion in Shintaro's heart, which seemed to be related to experiences from his previous life. Forget it. Let's think of a name first. Let's call it Ten Shadow. He created his first curse technique in this world. 33. The first mission the next morning, Shintaro received a mission notification stating that Shikaku had accepted a mission that needed to be completed by the 3 of them. Curious about the content of the mission, he changed his clothes and went out. Kurenai and Asuma also received the same mission notification. The 3 of them arrived at the Nara clan residence almost simultaneously. Although the Nara clan is not one of the major clans in Konoha, it has reached a certain scale. The 3 of them stood in front of the Nara clan gate, somewhat conspicuously. Fortunately, after being informed by the guard, Shikaku came out with a strange smile, making Shintaro suddenly feel uneasy. Sure enough, his prediction was correct, and Shikaku released the content of the mission. This time, it was a C-rank mission issued by Shikaku himself, patrolling the Nara clan's deer farm. The location was the Nara forest in the Land of Fire, which was the ancestral land of the Nara clan. Shikaku said, there won't be any danger in this mission, so I won't be going. Someone will guide you to the Nara forest. You just need to stay in the designated area for a month and be responsible for patrolling. Don't worry, generally, no one covets the Nara clan's territory. You go back and clean up. Shintaro just felt a bit bored. Initially, he was quite interested, but it turned out the mission was not dangerous. Kurenai was very excited because she had heard that there were many deer in the Nara deer farm. After all, little girls like small animals. Seeing Shintaro and the others return, Shikaku went back to the station. A clan elder said with dissatisfaction, "Shikaku, you handed over the task given to you by the clan again. Are you so unwilling to contribute to the clan?" Also, Shikaba is a forbidden area for the Nara clan. Only members of the Nara clan can enter. Shikaku waved his hand and said, "I am now a jonin of Konoha, so of course, I must contribute to Konoha first. Besides, wouldn't it be a contribution if I spread it? Also, those three are not only my students, but also the future of Konoha. Do you want to doubt the future of Konoha?" The clan elder fell silent and left in anger. Shikaku watched the departing elder and sighed. This is really troublesome. A young ninja from the Nara clan found the three of them one by one. This ninja's name was Nara Shimizu. He had a black ponytail and thick dark circles around his eyes. He said, "I'll take you to the deer farm. I'll be looking after you this month." Oh, what a hassle. Shikaku handed the task to me again. The three of them seemed to sense deep resentment and couldn't help but feel sympathy for Shimizu. CK, it seems our teacher really did a lot of bad things. Shimizu brought Shintaro, Kurenai, and Asuma to a forest in the hinterland of the Land of Fire that afternoon. This was the famous Nara forest. There were many deer and wild animals in captivity, and many valuable medicinal materials were planted there. Thanks to this forest, the Nara clan almost monopolized the medicine business in Konoha and even the Land of Fire. The Nara forest was vast, making it impossible for Shintaro and the others to patrol the entire area. In fact, the area designated by Shikaku for Shintaro was less than 1% of the entire Nara forest. But even so, this distance would take quite some time for Shintaro and the others to patrol, not to mention they had to be on guard all times, which would be even more troublesome. No wonder Shikaku didn't want to come. Shimizu led the three of them to a small wooden house and said, "This is where you will stay for the month. There are some supplies inside. There is a small town to the north of the forest. If the supplies are insufficient, you can go there to buy them. Supplies bought in the town can be billed to the Nara clan's account. Just present your mission voucher. That's it. By the way, the antlers will be harvested in 2 days. Although you don't know, Kage Main no Jutsu, you can still help me catch a few more deer. I will collect the antlers in 2 days and pay you extra according to the number of antlers. Here is a map of the forest. The forest is very vast. Please be safe and don't get lost. That's it. I'm leaving now." Shimizu left after giving a few instructions. Shintaro touched his nose and sighed. This first mission is not what I expected. He had heard Kakashi complain about the boring tasks in the village before, so he was mentally prepared. He could also accept capturing cats and dogs, and of course, he hoped the task could improve his actual combat abilities. But he didn't expect this mission to involve patrolling here for a month and still have accommodation. Call it enjoyable, but it was just strolling in the forest and catching deer. Call it boring, but it was easier than capturing cats and dogs. In short, both situations were different from what was expected. Kurenai and Asuma felt the same. The three of them then entered the wooden house and found that it was much more modern than expected, with modern furniture such as electric lights, a gas stove, a refrigerator, and a water heater. This made the three of them very satisfied. After all, they were used to the comfortable and fast life in Konoha village. The only thing that made them dissatisfied was that the cabin was too small and only had one bed. "I've never lived in a house this small," Asuma said, shaking his head. The same was true for Kurenai. Although her family was not as large as the Sarutobi clan, it was still a single-family villa located in the middle of the village. Among the three, only Shintaro had really lived a hard life. Before he was 5, he lived in a dilapidated house in a small town in the Land of Fire. It was almost the same size as the wooden house in front of him, and his house was almost empty. Shintaro said, "Complaining is not an option. This bed can only fit one person. Kurenai, you can sleep on the bed, and Asuma and I will sleep on the floor. Are you okay with that?" He then looked at Asuma, who shook his head. Although he was the eldest son of the Hokage family, he wouldn't be so spoiled as to compete for a bed with a girl. Kurenai was a bit embarrassed at first, but when she thought if she didn't sleep on the bed, she would definitely have to sleep with the boys, so she held back what she wanted to say and nodded slightly. The three of them packed their belongings and cleaned and decorated the house together. Kurenai wiped the sweat off her forehead, observed the result with her hands on her hips, and said, "Not bad. It finally looks livable." Shintaro also laid down the floor, and he and Asuma lay down to try it out. Kurenai looked at the two of them and couldn't help but laugh, then said with a smile, "I've worked hard for you this month. Don't worry, I'll be in charge of the food this month, and I'll give you healthy meals." Shintaro lay on the floor and gave a thumbs up. Asuma laughed heartily at this. Kurenai then checked the ingredients in the refrigerator and decided on tonight's menu: radish, potatoes, onions, and baby cabbage. Shintaro sat up and asked, "No meat?" Asuma also sat up and said, "The Nara forest is rich in vegetables, but isn't this too much?" Kurenai opened the refrigerator door and let them see for themselves. Shintaro didn't expect the supplies here to be sufficient, but no meat. He immediately said, "Let me go hunting so I can eat meat." Kurenai and Asuma objected. Asuma said, "Nara Shimizu didn't say whether we could hunt. If we act recklessly and cause trouble, we'll be in trouble." Kurenai said, "Let me go to town to buy it. By the way, you two can patrol." Shintaro had no choice but to suppress his desire to hunt. In this way, the three of them divided the work and cooperated. Kurenai went to town to buy something, while Shintaro and Asuma stayed in the forest to patrol and catch deer. 34. Competition. Shintaro and Asuma wandered through the forest, patrolling the area while searching for deer. However, after a full patrol, they hadn't seen a single deer. Asuma was puzzled by this. At this moment, Shintaro explained, "Deer are often found deep within the forest. They are very shy animals and usually stay deep in the forest to avoid natural predators. We're likely at the edge of the forest now, so the chances of encountering deer are relatively small. But don't worry, deer come out to forage at dusk. We just need to wait quietly. There's plenty of water and grass here, and many deer will surely come to feed." He then jumped onto a large tree branch, and Asuma followed suit. The two of them patrolled the trees, waiting for the deer to appear. It was getting late, and as they waited, a long deer call echoed from afar. Shintaro and Asuma exchanged glances, then pressed their bodies down, trying their best to stay silent, and jumped from tree to tree towards the sound of the deer. Sure enough, they spotted a herd of deer ahead. There were 6 deer, all of them males with large antlers on their heads. Shintaro touched the hemp rope behind his waist and whispered to Asuma, "Catch as many as you can." The male deer below heard the rustling noise and cautiously looked around, raising their heads to look. After confirming there were no predators around, the male deer lowered their heads and continued to graze on the young grass on the ground and wild fruits in the bushes. Shintaro and Asuma patiently waited until the deer had completely lowered their guard, then jumped down together. The deer herd sensed danger and scattered in an instant. The male deer spread their legs and ran very quickly, making it difficult for ordinary people to catch them. Indeed, it was challenging to catch them without harming the deer. No wonder the Uchiha Clan, who had been raising deer for generations, developed Kagemain no Jutsu to capture deer. Asuma chased after one deer and soon fell behind. Seeing this, Shintaro took the opportunity to form the hand seals for Kagemain no Jutsu, using the narrow shadows in the forest at dusk to directly capture the remaining 5 deer. At this moment, both Shintaro and the deer couldn't move, but he knew Kagebunshin no Jutsu, and he had pretended to learn it from Fugaku, so he could use it openly now. Shintaro created a shadow clone, took the hemp rope from the main body's waist, and tied up the 5 deer. The main body released. Kagemain no Jutsu took the hemp rope from the shadow clone's hand, connected the 5 deer together, then calmly led the front deer and started leading the herd to continue grazing. When Asuma returned, looking embarrassed while carrying a deer, he found that the 5 deer here had been grazing for some time. Asuma asked with a surprised expression, "How did you catch these 5 deer?" Shintaro said half seriously, "I relied on my shadow clone." Asuma could only accept this explanation, then placed the deer in his arms down, tied the hemp rope around its neck, and pulled it up. The two of them continued to patrol the forest with a deer each. However, not long after they left, the 6 deer seemed unwilling to move further, resisting the pull of the 2 men. Shintaro knew not to force it, otherwise it would be counterproductive, so he and Asuma tied the deer to a tree. The 2 of them continued to patrol the forest. Halfway through, Asuma suddenly said, "Uchiha Shintaro, let's compete." Shintaro was a bit surprised, as he hadn't interacted much with Asuma since entering the ninja school, and initially, he felt that Asuma was very disgusted with him. Unexpectedly, Asuma took the initiative to challenge him. Shintaro looked at him with a confused expression. Asuma quickly explained his intention. "I've been reflecting on the past few days, and I feel you've become a nightmare in my life. You know, the first time I fell in love was when I saw Kurenai. Initially, I wanted to pursue her, but you defeated me. After losing to you in love, I devoted myself to training and wanted to surpass you in strength. However, I found that my abilities as a ninja couldn't match yours. Even Kakashi, whom I always wanted to surpass, was defeated by you. So now I want to compete with you openly. So even if I lose, I can accept it peacefully." In this uninhabited forest, Asuma opened his heart to Shintaro and spoke for the first time. Shintaro was silent for a moment, making Asuma feel a bit nervous. Fortunately, Shintaro's next words made Asuma feel relieved. "All right, what do you want to compete in?" 3 competitions. Asuma voiced his thoughts very smoothly, indicating he had been rehearsing it in his mind for a long time. "All right, then I'll decide the first game." After thinking for a moment, Shintaro bent down and picked up a stone from the ground and said, "The first game is a stone throwing contest." Throwing stones? Asuma was a bit confused. Shintaro explained, "Stone is one of humanity's earliest weapons, originally used for hunting. However, in the Nara clan's forest, it's not easy to compare animals by hunting. We'll compete on who can throw farther. The rules are that you can't use chakra or other methods, and you must use the same stone." Asuma showed a clear expression and agreed to the rules immediately. So Shintaro handed the stone to Asuma and at the same time drew a horizontal line on the ground with his foot, saying, "This is the starting point. You throw first." Asuma stood behind the starting point, holding the stone tightly, warmed up a bit, then threw it hard, and the stone formed a beautiful arc and flew into the distance. A dull sound was heard in the distance, and the stone fell into the grass. Shintaro said, "Go to the stone and throw it back, then stand still and let me throw it again." Asuma did as instructed, so Shintaro picked up the stone that was thrown back, stood back at the starting point, and took a standard stone-throwing position. Then the stone was immediately shot out. The stone grazed past Asuma, and he could even feel the airwaves caused by the stone. Finally, the stone landed tens of meters in front of him. Shintaro won the first round. This time Shintaro didn't use chakra or cursed energy. He fully relied on his previous life's experience and his own strength to complete this astonishing throw. He remembered he had seemed to have stoned a large black bear to death during a hunting trip in his previous life. "What about the second game?" he asked. Asuma took out his 2 chakra knives and said, "Throwing knives, this time we can use chakra. 35. Release the bond, this time it's not about who goes farther, but about power. The rule is, you can use chakra to throw a knife at the same big tree. Whoever's knife hits stronger wins." Asuma added the details of the second competition. Shintaro gladly accepted. Both held their chakra blades and each injected chakra into them. This time, Shintaro did not use the 6 eyes to mimic the other party's method, but relied on his own understanding to inject chakra. He chose lightning attribute chakra because he felt it was the strongest among the 5 basic attributes. Asuma chose wind attribute chakra, his strength. Once ready, they threw their chakra knives almost simultaneously. Their target was a large tree, thick enough for 2 people to encircle it. Boom, 2 very different sounds emerged, and the knives they threw each caused significant damage to the tree. One knife cleanly penetrated the entire trunk, leaving a blade-thin hole in the middle. The other knife created a bowl-sized hole in the trunk, penetrating deep into the tree and leaving scorched marks around it. The first was thrown by Asuma, and the last by Shintaro. They both stepped forward to examine their own and each other's knives. Both were surprised by each other's strength. Asuma's wind blade had strong penetration power, while Shintaro's lightning blade had strong destructive power. But at this moment, Shintaro pulled out Asuma's chakra knife and said, "You win." Asuma looked to where Shintaro had been looking all this time. It turned out a stone had just been split in two by the wind blade's power. Asuma sighed in relief, seeing this, and said, "Then let's find Kurenai. It's getting late." Shintaro nodded, and they then brought the deer back to the wooden house and tied it outside. They waited for Kurenai, who returned to the cabin with a bag of supplies. Shintaro then explained the situation to her and asked her to think of a content for the competition. Kurenai thought the two men in front of her were playing a childish game and said, "Are you guys that childish? Still competing? Forget it. Later you'll see who can prepare the ingredients for me first. We'll have potato soup tonight. One of you will be in charge of cutting the potatoes, and the other in charge of cutting the beef. Cut the potatoes and beef into pieces. I happened to come to feed the deer." Kurenai handed a bag of ingredients to Shintaro, then happily went to the deer and looked at them curiously. Shintaro and Asuma went to the kitchen and took out the potatoes and beef among the ingredients. Shintaro asked, "Which do you choose?" Asuma thought for a moment and said, "I'll cut the meat." Shintaro handed him the beef, while he washed the potatoes first. After the preparations were done, the competition was about to begin. For fairness, Shintaro and Asuma used the same cutting board. Since there was only one kitchen knife, Asuma's chakra knife was used. Shintaro took 4 palm-sized potatoes, larger than Asuma's hands. They both shouted a countdown, then started at the same time. Bum, bum, bum. Shintaro held the chakra knife and started cutting the potatoes quickly. The cutting board made a clanging sound. The potatoes were quickly cut into thick slices and then into pieces. Asuma's movements on the other side were much fewer. The chakra knife was equipped with sharp wind, a tribute chakra. This allowed him to cut the meat, and his speed was no slower than Shintaro's. They both finished their work at the same time. At this moment, Kurenai opened the door and complained, "Why does only one of these deer eat the grass I feed?" You have finished cutting. Who was faster?" Shintaro and Asuma answered in unison at the same time. Since then, Kurenai entered the kitchen and began to check the quality of their work. At this moment, she noticed something strange and stared straight at Asuma's meat. Looking down, she finally realized something was wrong. She tried to pick up the cutting board, but only grabbed a wooden block, then pushed the cutting board, and the whole board scattered on the table. It turned out the cutting board and the beef were cut by Asuma. A black line appeared on Kurenai's face, and she said speechlessly, "There are only 2 cutting boards here. Really, you not only cut the beef, but also cut the board. Were you too impatient?" Hearing her criticism, Asuma lowered his head and did not dare to respond. "You two, stop causing trouble. Now I'll clean up this mess for you. You two just wait for dinner." With that, Shintaro and Asuma were driven out of the cabin by Kurenai. Outside, Asuma saw the moon appear in the night sky through the gaps in the trees and felt an inexplicable gloom in his heart, making him want to smoke. "I lost," Asuma said. "Yes, you lost, but it's 2-1. You're pretty good," Shintaro replied. Asuma smiled bitterly and said, "It's truly an honor for me." Originally, he thought he could accept failure calmly, but now it seemed his idea at that time was still too naive. When failure really came, even though he knew his opponent was Shintaro or for various other reasons, it was still difficult for him to overcome the obstacle in his heart. Shintaro suddenly said, "I think Kurenai's last sentence was quite good." Asuma reacted for a moment, recalling Kurenai's last words, then murmured, "Were you too impatient?" "Yes, I was too impatient." After he finished speaking, he thought for a long time, then sighed, "Oh yes, I was so impatient that I wanted to eliminate your shadow through 3 simple competitions. It seems I thought too much. You still remain my shadow." He said this, but he smiled instead. "But at least this shows that I don't lose to you in everything. My wind attribute is still better than yours, right?" Shintaro nodded and said, "I am indeed not as good as you in the use of wind attribute chakra." Asuma accepted the confirmation, and an old knot in his heart suddenly untied. He smiled and said, "If you want to learn, I can teach you." Shintaro gladly accepted this condition and at the same time said, "Then I will also teach you a technique." Asuma asked, "Isn't it the technique used by Namikaze Minato? Did you do the same thing with Kakashi last time?" Shintaro was stunned for a moment, then laughed heartily and said, "You're really smart. You guessed it right, it's Rasengan, but I still have to let Minato confirm it." Asuma also gladly accepted. After he opened his heart, their conversation opened up, and they talked about everything from time to time. "Do you like hunting?" "I've never tried it. I can teach you how to throw stones and shoot arrows, the two most practical hunting methods." "Okay, then I'll teach you how to play shogi." "Do you like playing shogi? Isn't it something only old people like? Don't you like shamisen?" Until Kurenai opened the door of the wooden house and shouted outside, "It's time to eat." Shintaro and Asuma just entered the wooden house and enjoyed a sumptuous dinner together. Kurenai noticed that the relationship between the two people in front of her seemed to have improved. She was puzzled for a moment and thought, the relationship between men is truly strange. That night, Uchiha Shintaro and Sarutobi Asuma slept on the same bed, resting on each other's feet. 36. Tsubaime no Hemono. The next morning, some people were awakened by a knock on the door. Shintaro and the others packed their clothes and opened the door, only to find Nara Shimizu outside. Shimizu was holding some pork and said apologetically, "Sorry, I used to stay in this cabin. I don't usually eat meat, so the fridge is full of local vegetables from a Nara forest. I was too busy yesterday and neglected this matter for a while. I'll make it up to you today." Kurenai repeatedly expressed her gratitude and took the pork. Shimizu continued, "You caught 6 deer outside the door, right? I'm here to take the antlers. This is your reward for today." Shintaro accepted the reward. Although he and Asuma only helped capture the deer, the reward was still significant. The price of deer antlers is very high, meaning the labor cost is also much higher. Shintaro asked about hunting again, and Shimizu said, "Do you still have the map?" Asuma returned to the cabin and brought out the map. Shimizu said, "There is a resource breeding chart of the forest at the back of the map. Some animals here are domesticated by the Nara clan. You cannot hunt them, which means you can capture them as long as they are not in the area." Shintaro was very surprised to hear this. Besides deer and other rare animals domesticated by the Nara clan, the forest also has many wild animals. Shimizu hurried away. Kurenai then put the meat in the fridge, walked out, and said, "One of us should go to town today to buy a cutting board." Asuma scratched his head and said apologetically, "Sorry, I broke it. I'll buy it." Shintaro didn't mind and added, "Also, buy a pair of bows and arrows. No, buy 2 pairs of bows and arrows." Asuma understood and smiled. "No problem." He then went to town to buy the cutting board and bows and arrows. Kurenai and Shintaro were patrolling together at this time. Kurenai asked, "You and Asuma are sleeping close together on the floor. Can you sleep comfortably?" Shintaro said, "I feel a little disgusted." Kurenai smiled and said jokingly, "Then you should sleep in bed with me." Shintaro replied seriously, "That's not impossible." Kurenai was shocked by her own words. She blushed like a ripe apple and quickly changed the topic. "By the way, when did your relationship with Asuma improve? Wasn't it difficult to deal with before?" Shintaro explained, "There were some conflicts we hadn't talked about before, but now that we've discussed them, everything is fine." Although Kurenai didn't fully understand, she nodded in relief. "That's good. I was always worried about your relationship." After patrolling a few times, Shintaro and Kurenai returned to the cabin to rest. This time, Asuma also returned with the items. He handed the cutting board to Kurenai and gave Shintaro the 2 pairs of bows and arrows he had brought. Shintaro opened the bows, tried them out, and said, "Although it's not a good bow, it can still be used." Asuma said, "No choice. There's only one shop in town that sells bows and arrows, so you have to make do." So Kurenai stayed in the cabin to rest, and Shintaro went on patrol with Asuma, taking the bows and arrows they wanted to try out. I'll start with the most basic teaching. Hold the bow in your left hand and the arrow in your right. Place the arrow on the bow like this. Hold the end of the arrow with 3 fingers grasp the arrow shaft with your index and middle fingers, hold the bow tightly with your left hand, and then use strength to draw the arrow and open the bow. As Shintaro explained, he took a stance with the bow and arrow ready, while Asuma watched carefully. Shintaro then aimed at a small rabbit hopping in the distance. An arrow shot out with a whoosh, hitting the rabbit's head. From that distance, it was no problem to shoot the rabbit, but hitting the small rabbit's head accurately showed his excellent skill. Asuma clapped in admiration. Shintaro waved his hand and said, "It's nothing." Asuma then imitated him, drawing the bow and knocking an arrow, aiming a large tree in front and shooting the arrow, but he missed the target. He smiled awkwardly, but seeing Shintaro not laughing at him, he continued to try and knocked another arrow. This time he took longer to aim, ensuring he wouldn't miss before releasing the arrow. With a thud, the arrow hit the edge of the large tree, not accurately, but it hit the target. Asuma put down the bow and arrow and smiled happily. Shintaro said, "Yes, it's very accurate after contact." Asuma said, "I need to practice more and strive to reach your level in the future." Shintaro said, "It's not easy to reach my level." The two men then laughed. Asuma put down the bow and arrow, took out his chakra blade, handed it to Shintaro, and said, "I promised to teach you how to use wind attribute chakra before. I have nothing to do now, so I'll teach you." The characteristics of wind attribute chakra are thin and sharp. Therefore, don't think about increasing its destructive power. Just refine the chakra to be thinner and sharper, the better. Just like this, said Asuma, pouring chakra into it, and the chakra blade immediately filled with chakra like a blade of wind light. Shintaro had to admit that Asuma was indeed excellent in the wind attribute. He didn't immediately imitate him with the 6 eyes, but tried to mimic it himself based on the key points Asuma mentioned. Shintaro then poured chakra into it, and they both threw it at a large tree. As a result, this time Asuma's blade pierced through the large tree as usual, but Shintaro's chakra blade only penetrated halfway. "Still not thin enough," said Asuma. Shintaro walked over, pulled out the chakra blade, and tried again. This time he still didn't use the 6 eyes. It's not difficult to inject wind element chakra into it, but it's somewhat challenging to keep it thin and sharp, as Asuma said. Even though Shintaro didn't use the 6 eyes, he didn't succeed on the first try, but he already had experience. So this time the chakra blade pierced through the large tree. Asuma was used to being surprised by the other's talent, but seeing Shintaro catching up so quickly in a field he was good at, he couldn't help but lament, "I really taught an apprentice." Shintaro said, "Don't worry, Rasengan will definitely compensate you." He pulled out the chakra blade stuck in the ground and asked, "Does this blade have a name?" Asuma shook his head and said no. Shintaro mentioned the name he had just thought of, Tsubame no Hamono. "What do you think of this name?" Asuma recalled the 2 people throwing the knives. The short blades filled with chakra flying in the air indeed looked like swallows flying. He took the knife handed over by Shintaro and said, "That's a good name. I'll give it to you." The patrol mission in the Nara forest passed boringly, yet interestingly day by day. 37. This is youth. The mission lasted for a month. A month later, Shintaro, Kurenai, and Asuma completed their mission and returned to Konoha to report it. After a month of getting along, Asuma became quite familiar with Shintaro and Kurenai, and at least the 3 of them looked like a team when they walked together. After finishing the mission, the 3 parted ways, and Shintaro headed home after dropping Kurenai off. On the way, Shintaro saw a strange figure in tight green pants walking upside down on the road and recognized him as his classmate, Mike Guy. Guy also found Shintaro's handsome appearance very easy to recognize, even while upside down. He immediately put one hand on the ground and greeted the car with the other. "Long time no see, Shintaro." Shintaro greeted back and said, "Yes, I just finished a mission and returned to Konoha." Guy said excitedly, "What a coincidence. I just wanted to challenge you." As he spoke, he flipped in the air and stood up. Guy was wearing sleeveless dark green tights, with a Konoha forehead protector tied around his waist, a ninja pouch strapped to his right leg, a bright red short scarf, bandages on his hands, and orange weights on his legs. There were some changes from his outfit during ninja school. However, his iconic bowl cut and thick eyebrows remained unchanged, but he looked a bit more like a ninja than before. After speaking, Guy showed his big white teeth and smiled foolishly, waiting for Shintaro's answer. After observing him with his 6 eyes, Shintaro was slightly surprised and said, "You've become stronger." He noted that Guy's muscles were robust and had more chakra than before, but the issues he observed earlier still existed, and it was still challenging for him to use ninjutsu. "But you still can't beat me," he said calmly. Shintaro didn't want to underestimate Guy, but was merely stating a fact. Guy's physical abilities were indeed excellent, but still at a normal level, not much different from his own. And Shintaro could entirely cover his weaknesses in physical skills with abundant chakra and cursed energy. Coupled with his ninjutsu and genjutsu skills, Guy wasn't his match. Guy said optimistically, "Nothing is impossible in this world. I used to think it was impossible for me to beat Kakashi, but recently I've won twice, and now my record is 2 wins and 16 losses. I won't compete with you in ninjutsu. Let's compete in taijutsu only, okay?" Shintaro found this interesting, so he accepted Guy's challenge. The two went to the training ground in Konoha. This training ground was a rocky desert with no vegetation, best suited for pure physical combat. The two stood facing each other on the brown ground, with the dazzling sun overhead. Guy gave a thumbs up, showing his big white teeth that were very dazzling under the sun, and the green tights on his body were also dazzling with green light. "I'm ready." He was very excited about the opportunity to fight the genius ninja of Konoha, Uchiha Shintaro. Shintaro played with a stone in his hand, then threw it into the air and said, "Start when the stone lands." The stone flew high into the air and started falling after reaching extreme height. Bang, the stone hit the hard ground with a dull thud. The two shot out at the same time and rushed towards each other. So fast, Guy was initially surprised by the other party's physical ability. They used punches and kicks simultaneously, one punch and one kick, hitting each other with flesh, producing a sound of impact. Guy threw a straight punch, and Shintaro caught the fist with his palm, and at the same time, he kneed Guy in the stomach. The abdomen is one of the most fragile and soft parts of the human body, so even Guy, who had trained intensely all year round, couldn't withstand the force of the move. He tensed his body to take the hit and didn't give up even though he was hit hard, making him groan hoarsely. He took a step back, then jumped up and lifted his leg, delivering a series of heavy kicks. Shintaro raised his hands to defend. If he didn't use enough chakra, even he would find it hard to cope. "The strength is good, but I need to work harder." He saw that Guy's physical skills were excellent, and he still had the energy to comment after the battle and even smile, seeming to handle it easily. Guy gritted his teeth and shouted, "In terms of physical skills, I won't lose to you. Konoha Senpu." He spun in the air and delivered a sharp kick. Shintaro dodged, but the force of the move shattered the rocky ground, even causing a series of cracks and raising dust. Seeing such a powerful move, he looked at him admiringly and said loudly, "Mike Guy, I underestimated you before. I initially thought your future achievements would be limited, but now it seems your future achievements are no less than Kakashi's. Thank you for the support." Guy shouted in the dust. Then there was only the sound of heavy landings, and his figure jumped out, his speed so fast it blurred. Guy rushed in front of Shintaro in an instant, and the sunlight shone, forming a shadow on the ground, and Guy was currently in Shintaro's shadow. He lowered his body back, his body almost parallel to the ground, with one hand and one foot on the ground, the other hand in the air for balance, and the other foot quickly kicking Shintaro's chin. This move used the power of his whole body to kick, and its strength couldn't be underestimated. Konoha Senpu. At this moment, Guy had removed the weights on his legs and exerted his full strength, so much so that he had to shout the move's name to vent the burden it brought to his body. With a thud, Shintaro was kicked and thrown back several meters before landing. "Did I make it?" Guy stood and watched him being thrown, but the result surprised him. "My hand is numb." Shintaro waved his hand as if nothing had happened. He had indeed reacted to Guy's strongest move with all his strength and blocked his chin with both hands first. He found Guy somewhat difficult to deal with. The move was very powerful. Fortunately, he had been vigilant. However, if there were no restrictions, Guy would surely have been controlled by Ten Shadow. Seeing his strongest move fail to succeed, Guy felt frustrated for a moment but quickly revived. Ha ha ha, this move didn't work? As expected of you. Shintaro, looks like I have to work harder. This is youth. Shintaro also laughed, right? Enjoy the fight. Shintaro's and Guy's thought processes actually connected at this moment. The two rushed toward each other again. Guy removed his weights, and the speed and strength of his punches and kicks reached a new level. For a moment, Shintaro could only parry, finding it difficult to find an opportunity to counterattack under Guy's rapid assault. He forced Guy back with a sweeping kick. When Guy attacked again, Shintaro's style changed completely. Is this Gentle Fist? 38. Eternal Genin Shintaro clenched his fist into his palm, took a forward and backward stance, lowered his body, and stepped forward to attack. Guy was startled by Shintaro's sudden change in movement. He was hit by several consecutive moves and retreated a few steps, embarrassed to withdraw. Shintaro said, "This isn't the Uchiha Clan's Gentle Fist, but the Uchiha Clan's Gentle Fist." Guy showed an expression of realization. He rushed forward, lifted his leg, and kicked. This side kick was very strong, powerful enough to break a large tree. Whoosh this time, Shintaro didn't struggle, but used softness to overcome strength. One palm pressed against Guy's leg and released the force along with the momentum, while the other palm struck his opponent's body again. Guy lost his balance and retreated repeatedly with muffled sounds before barely regaining his balance. The two continued to fight one-on-one. Gentle Fist moves quickly and flexibly, excelling in short-range attacks close to the body. However, Guy's movements were wide open and closed, making it difficult to exert full force when close to the body. They kept fighting, each movement so fast that Guy had no chance to withdraw and distance himself. At any moment, Shintaro would close in again and hit him with several palm strikes. Guy only felt his movements becoming slower and more tiring, until at some point he could no longer withstand it at all. In an instant, Shintaro struck Guy's body, blocking most of Guy's acupoints, and he was thrown down, unable to get up again. In this physical duel, Shintaro won. Guy fell on his back on the rocky ground, struggling to rise with his hands on the ground. Shintaro walked over and helped him stand, simultaneously helping to release the blocked chakra from Guy's body. While tending to him, Shintaro sighed inwardly about Guy's unique constitution. After receiving 32 strikes, the meridians in his body were still strong, and the traces of Gentle Fist even showed signs of recovery. As expected from Shintaro, "You're also better than me in physical skills. Training must be doubled tonight." Guy sighed and decided to work harder in his special training tonight. Shintaro patted his shoulder and said, "Your physical skills are very strong. I acknowledge you. You probably haven't had lunch, right? Come on, I'll take you out for some barbecue." Shintaro invited him to eat, first because he acknowledged the other's strength, and second because in the previous fight his 6 eyes had mimicked his moves, so this could be considered compensation. Guy showed an embarrassed expression, scratching his head and said, "I don't have much money." Shintaro waved his hand and said indifferently, "It's okay, I'll treat you." Guy was still a bit embarrassed. Shintaro said, "There's nothing to be ashamed of. We're all classmates. If you don't come, you won't be able to look at me." He put his hands in his pockets and walked away. Guy thought Shintaro was angry, so he hurriedly approached and repeatedly said, "I'm coming." Thus, the two of them went to Barbecue Q and enjoyed a lavish meal. Guy felt embarrassed before he came. Once he got to the shop, he smelled the barbecue and started eating. Shintaro had heard that Guy's father was an eternal genin, and his family was definitely not wealthy. Additionally, he trained in taijutsu all year round, which consumed a lot of physical strength and naturally had a large appetite, probably unable to afford meat often. Seeing this, he asked the boss to serve several plates of meat and spent a lot of money. Fortunately, Shintaro had just completed a mission and had some spare money. Because of the time it took to grill the meat and their large appetites, the meal lasted more than an hour. Over an hour later, after they had eaten and drank enough, They stood up and left the shop. As soon as they both stepped out the door, a figure caught their attention. It was a man who looked very much like Guy, with dark bowl-cut hair with a center part, and he also wore tight green pants and orange leg warmers. Perhaps the only difference was the man's scarf, which was yellow. The man was hopping along the street. It turned out he was chasing a kitten in front of him. At a glance, Shintaro knew it was Might Guy's father, Might Dewey, and thought to himself, I heard he's an eternal genin, and now he's indeed doing a task of catching a cat that only a genin would do. He looked at Dewey in front of them with interest. Guy felt very embarrassed seeing this. After all, he thought, Uchiha Shintaro is a Konoha ninja genius and will surely become a jonin in the future. But his father was just a genin, doing low-level tasks on the streets. Guy worried Shintaro would laugh at his father. As a result, Shintaro said something unexpected to Guy. Guy, is that your father? Guy nodded, and Shintaro smiled and said, Your father is a very interesting ninja. He's very strong. Interesting? Strong. Guy looked at him, thinking he was still mocking, but seeing his expression, he felt he was serious. Shintaro nodded and said, Yes, an interesting ninja. He used his 6 eyes to find that Dewey was more than he seemed on the surface. It seemed like Dewey only had genin-level chakra in his body, but with his 6 eyes, Shintaro could see abnormalities in the other's meridians. Judging by the meridians, Dewey had at least once had jonin-level chakra, which caused some permanent damage. There were 2 possibilities. One was that Dewey had been a strong jonin, but for some reason he was injured and his strength declined before becoming a genin. The other possibility was that Dewey was indeed a genin, but had some secret technique allowing him to temporarily become a jonin. Thus he was injured and left with such traces. Regardless of the possibility, Dewey was not the eternal genin, as the villagers said. Guy was a bit confused because he thought his father was indeed an ordinary genin, and he didn't even have ninjutsu talent like himself. Even in terms of physical talent, Dewey wasn't as good as him. When Guy was still in ninja school, he could run 5,000 laps around the playground, but Dewey could only run 500 laps. How could someone like that receive such an assessment from Shintaro? Guy didn't go home after parting with Shintaro, but went to the training ground where he usually trained to start his special training. He trained until night, and the wooden piles used for practice were full of large holes from his punches. Guy's hands were also in bad condition. The bandages on his hands were soaked with blood and sweat. Guy was sweating heavily but still said, Punch 5,000 times. If I can't, squat 2,000 times. My youth will never give up. Half an hour later, Guy finally completed the 5,000 punches and sat down tiredly to rest for a while. At this time, Dewey appeared at the training ground. When he saw his son, he walked over and wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, That cat was really hard to catch. It's already late. He walked to the side and was stunned when he saw his son's injured hands, as he hadn't seen him train so hard and even ignore his hands in a long time. Guy, do you have a problem? He asked with concern. Although Guy thought his father couldn't help much, he still told him that he lost to Shintaro in the field he was good at. After listening to this, Dewey also showed a serious expression on his face. He patted his son's shoulder and said sincerely, It seems your path of youth has encountered a hurdle. As a father, there's only one last thing I can do. Listen, you must pay close attention, Guy. Dewey walked to the open space beside them as if he wanted to show something. Guy immediately recalled what Shintaro had said. Your father is an interesting ninja. He's very strong. Father, isn't he the eternal genin? 39. Hashiman Dewey clenched his fists and placed them at his waist, shouting loudly. A wave of green energy enveloped his entire body, causing his hair to stand up from the force. Guy looked shocked. Father, this is... Dewey said, Hashiman, one of the forbidden techniques. This is the only ultimate technique I have mastered through over 20 years of hard training. Now, I will teach it to you. Only then did Guy realize that his father was not as simple as he had thought, and he was also surprised by Shintaro's accurate judgment. Dewey continued to explain, Hashiman is very dangerous to the body, and the final gate, the gate of death, requires burning one's own life to use it. So the most important thing in learning Hashiman is self-discipline. Guy, you must remember that you can only use Hashimen when you need to burn your youth. Seeing his father's blood-covered body and white eyes, Guy knew that what his father said was true, so he nodded solemnly and promised, I understand. Father, I will use Hashimen to live my youth. Dewey smiled happily and then released Hashimen. He was exhausted, out of breath, and drenched in sweat after using Hashimen for just a short time, demonstrating the heavy burden Hashimen placed on his body. After calming down, Dewey began teaching Guy the training method of Hashimen. Guy learned very seriously, knowing that this was his best chance to surpass geniuses. A few days later, a rare guest came to Shintaro's house. Shintaro opened the door and was a bit confused about why Guy suddenly visited his house. Guy said enthusiastically, Shintaro, you were right. My father is truly amazing. Shintaro raised an eyebrow, curiously, clearly interested. He led Guy to his yard and asked, Why do you say that? Guy said excitedly, My father knows a forbidden technique called Hashimen. This technique can enhance a person's strength, and its effects are incredible. Guy's words confirmed Shintaro's initial assessment, and he thought clearly, is this really the second case? He had already thought in his mind that the second situation was more likely, because if it were the first, the villagers would not have underestimated Dewey so much. Using his 6 eyes, he observed Guy's body and found traces similar to those in Dewey's. However, Guy's special physique greatly reduced the side effects of Hashimen, leaving almost no damage to his meridians. Have you also learned Hashimen? Although Shintaro knew the answer, he still asked the question. Guy nodded enthusiastically and said, I have, but I can only use the first gate. Shintaro then analyzed that Hashimen is a forbidden technique that gradually increases a person's strength through 8 stages and was quite intrigued by it. So he asked, the first gate? Are there a total of 8 gates? Guy looked puzzled and said, How did you know? Shintaro felt helpless and said, Can't you tell just by hearing the name? Guy chuckled and said, I didn't even realize it. After laughing, he began to explain seriously the related knowledge of Hashimen. There are a total of 8 gates in Hashimen. From the first gate to the 8th gate, the power gradually increases. They are the gate of opening, gate of healing, gate of life, gate of pain, gate of limit, gate of view, gate of wonder, and gate of death. Gradually lifting the body's limitations on chakra, it releases chakra that exceeds one's strength and uses dozens of times the original power. It is said that when the user opens the gate of death, they can gain strength exceeding that of a Kage. But the cost of opening the gates is damage to the body. Before the 4th gate, the damage to the body is relatively small. From the 4th gate onward, each opening will cause permanent damage to the body, and opening the gates requires a strong physical condition to support it. Shintaro was intrigued by such a powerful forbidden technique. After all, a technique that could directly increase one's strength would be highly beneficial to anyone. As for the side effects, he thought they were nothing, and perhaps there could be a way to reduce or even eliminate the side effects. After the introduction, Guy looked at Shintaro and asked, Do you like this technique? Shintaro replied, A ninjutsu as strong as this is not something I wouldn't care about. I'm afraid there isn't anyone in the entire ninja world who wouldn't want this jutsu. Seeing this, Guy felt relieved and said, Great, I'm here to teach you this technique. Although Shintaro was very touched, he still asked the reason. So Guy told the whole story. I told my father what you said back then. He suddenly cried when he heard you say that he was very interesting and strong. Then, he asked me to pass this technique to you, saying that you are his trusted person and someone who truly understands his youth. Shintaro listened and felt that he had gained an advantage for nothing, because at that time, he felt sorry and those words were just casual, but he didn't expect those words would grant him such an extraordinary forbidden technique. Shintaro then said, I will accept this technique, but I will exchange it with the Uchiha Clan's shuriken technique. Although this is far inferior to the Hashimen you gave me, I can definitely repay you in the future. He judged that since Dewey and his son lacked the ability to use ninjutsu and jinjutsu, and Gentle Fist couldn't be used without Byakugan or 6 eyes, he could only propose the shuriken technique. Initially, Guy intended to refuse and give it for free, but in the end, after Shintaro's repeated requests, he agreed. The two began to teach each other their techniques and also studied each other's techniques. Guy's talent in taijutsu was not weak, and since the shuriken technique also belonged to taijutsu, his progress in learning the shuriken technique was not slow. However, due to the lack of a pair of eyes as sharp as the six eyes or Sharingan, sometimes his technique was there, but his eyes were not. In comparison, Shintaro's talent was even higher. Naturally, it was actually more than one level higher. He had never known about Hashimen before, but after Guy explained the principles, he could observe the locations of the Hashimen gates through his six eyes. After Guy demonstrated the opening of the gate of opening, Shintaro immediately imitated it with his six eyes. In this way, he could easily open the gate of opening. However, this was because his physical fitness was already very strong, allowing him to imitate it directly. While the method could be imitated, whether the body could withstand it was another matter. But after learning Hashimen, Shintaro discovered there was another deficiency in Hashimen, which was that the chakra after opening the 8 gates was too violent. If an ordinary person was in this condition, they would certainly be unable to use ninjutsu, at least complex ninjutsu. This limited the true power of Hashimen, as only taijutsu-type ninjas could fully exert their strength when using Hashimen. But Shintaro was different. He had 6 eyes, which allowed him to manipulate chakra precisely. Even in the violent state of Hashimen, he could still manipulate chakra to perform ninjutsu. Therefore, it could be said that the 6 eyes and Hashimen were a natural pair. 40. Introduction to the Ninja World War. In the following days, Shintaro worked hard to train in Hashimen, while completing tasks with everyone in Team 8. Time often flies quickly when people are busy. In the blink of an eye, it was the 47th year of Konoha. Shintaro's strength had increased rapidly, and he could now open the gate of pain of Hashimen, with progress even surpassing Guy. During this period, Shikaku was clearly busier than ever, and he didn't have time to accompany Shintaro and the others on missions. After all, Shikaku was a jonin, so he couldn't accompany 3 genin on simple missions every day. Fortunately, the strength of the 3 of them was not ordinary, so these usual genin tasks could easily be completed by the 3 of them alone. Needless to say, Shintaro's strength had reached the jonin level in all aspects. It was precisely because of this that Shikaku felt relieved to let them carry out their missions on their own. Asuma's strength was also impressive. He had reached the Chunin level at the age of 11, and his power was considered strong even among Chunin. His training in wind element, fire element, and ninjutsu had started to bear fruit, and he would not be in vain against weaker special jonin. Such talent was indeed considered top tier in the village, but it wasn't as dazzling compared to Shintaro, who was in the same class. Among the 3, Kurenai was the weakest. However, Kurenai's situation was quite special. Her ninjutsu talent was not high, but her jinjutsu talent was good, so she chose to become a jinjutsu ninja. For most ninjas, it was not unreasonable to use more ninjutsu than jinjutsu, because if jinjutsu did not reach a high level, its effect would not be significant. Many people could see through jinjutsu and use various methods to break its effects. Therefore, the mid-genin period was a transitional period for jinjutsu-type ninjas. During this time, jinjutsu-type ninjas were often not as strong as ninjutsu-type ninjas, and might even lose to taijutsu-type ninjas. Fortunately, after ninjas passed this period and reached the jonin level, jinjutsu-type ninjas would become a significant force against weaker ninjas and could achieve surprising victories against ninjas of the same level. Kurenai's jinjutsu level had actually reached Chunin level, but if she only used jinjutsu against other Chunin of the same level, she had almost no chance of winning. Fortunately, under Shintaro's guidance over the years, Kurenai had mastered good taijutsu and Rasengan. In terms of overall strength, she was already comparable to an average Chunin, and perhaps even slightly better. Therefore, all members of Team 8 had reached Chunin level or higher. Taking on genin missions was naturally easy. As for why the three of them had not taken the Chunin exam to be promoted to Chunin, that was something to ask Shikaku. Originally, Shintaro planned to take the Chunin exam immediately after graduation, but the Chunin exam required 3 people to take the exam together. So he waited until Kurenai, the weakest of the 3, reached the Chunin level and then asked Shikaku to take the Chunin exam. But Shikaku refused. At that time, he frowned and said seriously, "The current situation is not peaceful. It would be better if you were promoted later. The higher the level of the ninja, the more dangerous the missions. You are still too young. I can't let you take the risk. Just wait another year." Shintaro could understand Shikaku's thoughts, but he still had personal experience with what was called a turbulent situation. After all, as a genin who lived in Konoha in the land of fire all year round, he couldn't feel the series of changes quietly happening in the entire ninja world. However, sometimes situations tend to change unexpectedly. When people were immersed in the long-standing peaceful atmosphere built by Konoha, traces of war suddenly appeared. On this day, because there was no mission, Kurenai suggested going shopping together. Shintaro agreed. So the two started wandering around Konoha's shopping street. It must be said that Konoha's commerce was very developed, with various shops springing up along the streets and a dazzling array of products. The energy a girl puts out while shopping is limitless. Kurenai dragged Shintaro into every shop and enjoyed it as a visit even if she didn't buy anything. Along the way, from time to time, women who had been there would tease the pair of boys and girls on the street. Handsome boy and beautiful girl, truly a perfect couple. This made Kurenai blush immediately, and she quickly tried to explain, but those people often left with mischievous smiles, leaving her there in annoyance. To the extent that she finally punched Shintaro's chest with her fist to express her anger. Shintaro said it didn't hurt or itch. When Kurenai saw that he wasn't cooperating at all, she immediately pouted angrily and turned to the side. Shintaro smiled bitterly at this, then saw a flower shop next to him and said, "Let me buy you a bouquet of flowers." Hearing this, Kurenai could no longer pretend and immediately showed a surprised expression. But after seeing Shintaro's half-smiling expression, Kurenai held back her expression and only said, "Okay." With a smile on his lips, Shintaro led her to the flower shop on the side of the road. The two of them looked around the flower shop. The flower shop's area wasn't very large, but it had all the necessary items and was very neat. Flowers of various colors were placed inside and outside the shop, both beautiful and elegant, giving the entire flower shop a charming fragrance. "Welcome to Yamanaka Flower Shop. What kind of flowers do you need?" A young, brown-haired shop owner asked with a smile. She stood behind the counter, dignified and graceful. Shintaro replied, "Please help me wrap a bouquet. I'm giving it to her." He pointed towards Kurenai, who was looking at the flowers. So the shop owner asked, "Does the guest have any preferences?" Kurenai came back to her senses and replied, "I don't have any particular preferences, as long as it looks good." The shop owner came out from behind the counter and said, "Then I'll recommend a few flowers, and you can choose." She went to the arranged flowers and introduced them. "Roses, these are the standard gift for lovers. Our shop has red roses, pink roses, yellow roses, purple roses, white roses, and many other varieties." Kurenai couldn't help but feel embarrassed again when she heard the word lovers. Seeing this, the shop owner smiled and then introduced, "There are also lilies that symbolize purity, as well as harmony, suitable for sending to friends and relatives." Kurenai nodded repeatedly. At this moment, a man with yellow hair and a long ponytail, wearing a jonin vest, walked out from the backyard of the flower shop. He looked at Shintaro and Kurenai and said, "These two young guests look familiar. Are they Shikaku's 2 students?" Shintaro and Kurenai immediately understood that they had met a senior, so they bowed slightly. The man said, "No need to be formal. We're all family. The reason I recognize you is because I saw you and Shikaku sitting together when he took you for barbecue last time. At that time, I saw you chatting happily, so I didn't come up to disturb you. I just greeted Shikaku. By the way, my name is Yamanaka Inoichi, and this is my wife, Yamanaka Hayes. Shikaku and I have been teammates for many years." Only then did Inoichi remember to introduce himself, and he introduced the flower shop owner, who was his wife. When Shintaro and Kurenai heard that the other party was their teacher's friend, they immediately became closer. Inoichi smiled and said, "All right, I'm ready to go out. Just leave the flower purchase to Hayes. She has good taste." He was about to leave when suddenly the sound of crying and tears came from outside the door, approaching the area. Several people in the shop were suddenly stunned. After a while, they saw a group of people wearing pure black funeral kimonos walking past the shop door. Many people in the group were already crying. Inoichi saw the body being carried inside and murmured, "Is it him? He was transferred to the Kumogakure defense line a few days ago. He's already dead. It seems that even with the yellow flash there, casualties are inevitable." Inoichi's words made Shintaro suddenly realize that war was approaching. At this time, the ninja world was in a tense situation, and local conflicts had broken out in several places. Some people said that this was the beginning of the Ninja War. In the northeastern part of the Land of Fire, ninjas from Kumogakure in the Land of Lightning often invaded the territory without permission, and the northeastern border defense pressure of Konoha was very high. Fortunately, Namikaze Minato had made a name for himself with the title of Yellow Flash. He alone had repelled the invasion of Raikage Sun and the Eight Tails Jinchuriki a few days ago, and he was in the limelight for a while. However, even so, it couldn't change the brutal fact of war. For ordinary ninjas, border conflicts were not an opportunity for fame, but a danger that could kill people. "Help us wrap 2 bouquets of white chrysanthemums," Kurenai whispered. 41. Shursui and Itachi Kurenai heard the sorrowful crying outside and lost her mood. Instead, she chose to let the shopkeeper pick some white chrysanthemums and wrap them up. She and Shintaro left holding a bouquet of white chrysanthemums and went to the cemetery where the ninjas who died in the border battles were buried to offer their condolences. Inoichi gently said, "These 2 children are very good." Hayes nodded and agreed with her husband. After offering the flowers, Shintaro and Kurenai parted ways. Shintaro returned to the Uchiha Clan station and was stopped by several acquaintances. "Boss Shintaro." One after another, voices called out, and it was Uchiha Kotetsu and the others who came. In the blink of an eye, the mischievous students from the ninja school had grown into qualified Konoha genin, among whom Kotetsu and Hamasu were the strongest. "What's up?" Shintaro observed that several people seemed to have something to say. "The patriarch's wife has given birth, and now many people in the village are gathering to witness the joy." Kotetsu explained the situation, and Shintaro also became interested. "Then let's go together." After hearing his words, Kotetsu and the others happily followed Shintaro to the patriarch's house. A large group of people gathered outside the courtyard, all trying to join in the joy of the patriarch's child's birth, and everyone speculated whether the child would be a boy or a girl. At this moment, the courtyard door opened, and Fugaka came out with a happy face and said to everyone, "My wife has just given birth to a son named Uchiha Itachi." Everyone stepped forward and took out their gift bags containing congratulatory money, hoping to establish a relationship with the patriarch's family. A man shouted loudly, "What a great name! He will surely be as strong as the patriarch in the future and revitalize the Uchiha clan." "Yes," everyone echoed endlessly. But Kotetsu whispered beside Shintaro, "Itachi, weasel. Isn't that just a weasel? Isn't that creature unlucky?" In traditional concepts, weasels indeed symbolize mystery and bring bad luck and misfortune. Shintaro smiled faintly and explained, "Weasels are actually very strong predators. They are agile, fast, and fierce. They are small, but can prey on animals larger than themselves. Maybe the patriarch chose this name for this reason, hoping his son would gain the strengths of a weasel in the future." Kotetsu scratched his head and revealed his ignorance. After all, there are so many fierce predators in the world. Why call him Itachi? However, he still echoed amidst the crowd, "Great name." As the crowd dispersed and the excitement faded, it was already dark. Shintaro handed Fugaku a congratulatory bag. The money inside wasn't much, but it was just a token of appreciation. Fugaku took the gift bag with a happy face, patted Shintaro on the shoulder, and said, You will stay for dinner tonight. There aren't many people at the family banquet. Shintaro bowed respectfully to express his gratitude. With so many people coming to congratulate, being able to stay for the family dinner showed how much they valued him. Shintaro sent a shadow clone to Kurenai's house to inform her that he would not be coming for dinner that night, and then followed Fugaku to tidy up the courtyard. The people who came and went just now must have made a mess of Fugaku's yard. Your Sharingan hasn't awakened yet, has it? Fugaku asked casually. While tidying up the messy courtyard, Shintaro replied, I'm embarrassed to say it hasn't. Fugaku said, Don't be embarrassed. The awakening of the Sharingan is conditional. It must face tragic events like witnessing the loss of relatives and friends, and can only be awakened when one is at their lowest. That's why the Sharingan is also called the cursed eye. And you've been mature since childhood, with a wise mind and a stable personality. It will be harder for you to activate the Sharingan with such a personality. Shintaro felt strange after hearing Fugaku's explanation. Why is the way to awaken the Sharingan so odd? I think the Uchiha Clan can awaken theirs by learning to form seals to control chakra. Shintaro was confused, so he asked Fugaku, Patriarch, can you show me your Sharingan? Fugaku put down what he was doing and turned to face him, locking eyes with Shintaro. Suddenly, Fugaku's black eyes changed appearance, his original black pupils immediately turning blood red with 3 black tomo on them, making his whole temperament sharp and solemn. Shintaro's 6 eyes blinked, and he immediately discovered the secret of the Sharingan. The Sharingan's chakra connects to a certain part of the brain. It seems the secret lies here. It's a pity I can't directly see what this brain area does. Otherwise, I should be able to uncover the Sharingan's secret right away. It looks like I can only conduct further research after I awaken the Sharingan. Shintaro thought to himself. Fugaku then closed his Sharingan. At this moment, another guest came through the door. A boy with slightly curly short black hair came in holding a congratulatory bag and handed it to Fugaku, then bowed and said, Sorry, Uncle Fugaku. I was just practicing at the training ground, so I'm late. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that you came. Fugaku kindly took the gift bag and said, You can stay and eat with us too. Then he looked at Shintaro and introduced, Shintaro, this is Uchiha Shursui, a descendant of Kagami-sama, who once served as the second Hokage's guard. Shursui, this is Uchiha Shintaro, whom you've always been thinking about. Fugaku then introduced Shintaro to Shursui. After all, Uchiha Shintaro's reputation as a genius was admired by every teenager. Shursui respectfully said, Hello, Shintaro. Shintaro also returned the greeting, Hello. Fugaku looked at the 2 people in front of him, smiled, and said, You two are the future of the Uchiha Clan. From now on, I will ask you to take care of Itachi. Shintaro and Shursui both responded together. Fugaku then led the 2 inside the house. Inside the house, several servants were doing their best to take care of Mikoto, who had just given birth, and the newborn Itachi. Shintaro and Shursui first greeted and paid their respects to Mikoto, then, led by Fugaku, went to the cradle to visit Itachi. So this is what a newborn looks like, Shursui said as he looked at Itachi, lying in the cradle, unaware of the outside world. Shintaro wasn't interested in babies, but it seemed Shursui liked them. Fugaku looked at the baby, named Itachi. The sharp and serious look in his eyes had long disappeared, replaced by the tenderness and hopeful affection of a father. The 3 then enjoyed a family dinner together. While eating, Fugaku said to Shintaro, Shursui has just entered the ninja school. His achievements at school are very good, and he has a style similar to yours back then. Shursui repeatedly said humbly that he didn't dare to take it seriously, but Shintaro commented, As a member of the Uchiha Clan, isn't it normal to be outstanding? The 3 laughed together, and the scene was very harmonious for a while. After dinner, Shintaro returned home and started training. He didn't fall asleep until late at night. 42. Dream of a past life general. Those 2 monsters are here, and they want to compete before the emperor. In the 9th year of Keicho, in Edo, Japan, a samurai wearing armor rushed towards the shogunate, shouting and running in panic. When the old shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu heard this, he immediately waved his hand and commanded with trembling hands, "Release! Release Hidetada. I still want to live for a few more years." Tokugawa Ieyasu was appointed by the emperor as the general conqueror of barbarians and senior minister. In fact, he had effectively overthrown the emperor and become the highest authority in Japan. But such a great man showed a panicked expression at this moment, only because the two monsters mentioned by the warrior were actually invincible by human beings. If these two started to fight, the consequences could be dire. People tend to fear death more as they age. So Tokugawa Ieyasu hurriedly ordered his son to lead the imperial competition on his behalf. Although the second-generation shogun candidate, Tokugawa Hidetada, was also afraid of death, he did not dare to disobey his father's wishes. So he had to leave the city in fear with a large number of his own soldiers. "Hey, someone from the Tokugawa family is here, but it's a pity it's not the old man, Tokugawa Ieyasu." "No matter. Since we're here, let's begin." The voices of two men actually came from the sky. Tokugawa Hidetada and the others looked up at the two people in the sky, as if they were seeing gods. Both were the most handsome men in the world. One had long black hair tied back casually, wearing a kimono as black as the night sky, and a pair of black eyes like an intimidating abyss. The man stood on a large harpy-faced monster, urging the other man to start the decisive battle. The other man said nonchalantly, "Don't be anxious." Although this man was equally handsome, he had a very different temperament. The white-haired man had a hairstyle that was quite strange for people of that time. His eyes were as bright as sapphires and as mesmerizing as the starry blue sky. The man wore a loose, pure white kimono, standing in the air, with a smile often seen on his lips. The three great sorcerer families in the jiu-jitsu world have inherited family curse techniques integrated into their bloodlines for generations. Among them, the Zenin family is the strongest with the 10 Shadows technique, while the strongest in the Gojo family are the Limitless technique and 6 Eyes. Originally, the two families lived peacefully and harmoniously, alternating as the strongest families in the jiu-jitsu world. But I did not expect that the Jiu-Jitsu Sorcerer of the 10 Shadows technique and the Jiu-Jitsu Sorcerer of the 6 Eyes and Limitless technique of this era would be born together. This led to an unprecedented conflict between the two families to compete for the top spot. So members of the two families primarily used the method of fighting in front of the emperor to determine the outcome of the two families. The speaker was none other than Tokugawa Hidetada. The Jiu-Jitsu world was hidden from the world, but the secular leaders of Japan were well aware of it. If jiu-jitsu sorcerers had no intention of dominating the world, how could this world be ruled by people like them? Tokugawa Hidetada recounted the situation of the two people in front of him with a dizzy face. He would be the one to replace the Edo shogunate in the future, so he could not die young here. So he immediately ordered his soldiers to surround him and hide inside to protect himself. The white-haired one is Gojo Shintaro, and the black-haired one is Zenin Kenichi. "Watch over me. Don't let them accidentally hurt me." The soldiers were ordered to surround Tokugawa Hidetada. Shintaro in the sky smiled and said, "You haven't even set up a curtain. Are you planning to destroy Edo? Anyway, I should make the group of people below witness your defeat by me." Kenichi was very displeased and said, "You're contradicting yourself. As a witness that I defeat you." The verbal confrontation between the two had begun, and they formed a seal with one hand at the same time. "Emerge from the darkness, blacker than darkness. Purify that which is impure." The name of the head of the Keicho era Gojo family. Along with the incantations recited by the two men, a large black barrier suddenly appeared outside Edo City, covering the open space outside the city nearly as large as the entire city. There was a small transparent barrier within the barrier, covering Tokugawa Hidetada and his group. The effect of both barriers was that people inside could not get out, and people outside could not get in, and they had very strong internal and external defenses. Only the two strongest people in the world could use such a powerful barrier effect. "Now you can begin." Shintaro raised his finger and challenged. Kenichi's face darkened. He made a shadow with his hand and shouted firmly, "Get down from here." Bonsho, Muksh elephant. A giant pink elephant covered with patterns suddenly appeared above Shintaro's head. It was a Shikigami summoned by Kenichi's power using shadows as the medium. Therefore, its size and weight were much larger than ordinary elephants, and it had strength comparable to ancient beasts. Boom Shintaro was thrown from the sky to the ground. The weight of the elephant and the kinetic energy falling from the sky created huge cracks in the earth, and a burst of dust covered the sky and rose into the air. However, this was not the end. Along with a roar, a large amount of water spurted out from the elephant's trunk, sweeping it away in an instant. The inside of the curtain instantly became empty. If not for the curtain's protection, Edo Castle would have been flooded. Kenichi immediately retracted the elephant and controlled the human-faced bird under his feet to dive down. Nu! Kenichi jumped into the air, and Nu dived down, bringing with it a powerful purple bow. Nu rushed into the water with force, and the electric arc on its body spread, causing huge waves to shine with purple light. Seeing this, Kenichi changed his hand shape again, this time into a snake shape. Orochi, great serpent, he summoned a giant snake and landed smoothly on the back of the snake. At the same time, Nu grabbed Shintaro with its claws and threw him into the sky. The tens of meters long Orochi swallowed Shintaro directly into its belly. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A strange red light emanated from the mouth of the giant snake. Then its entire head exploded, and 5 strands of hair flew out unharmed. You haven't progressed much compared to when you were young. The Gojo and Zenin families had a good relationship in the past, so the two met and fought each other when they were young. Have you mastered reverse cursed technique? Kenichi looked surprised. He knew that the series of operations just now could not penetrate infinity. It was just to trap the other party. Unexpectedly, Shintaro mastered reverse curse technique one step ahead, which directly destroyed one of his Shikigami. Damn, I can't use domain while maintaining the curtain. Both domain and curtain are a kind of barrier, which will isolate each other. In other words, if you're in a domain, you cannot maintain a curtain. If I can't use domain, then just use curse technique. Let's show off, Shintaro said while pointing 2 fingers at Nu flying in the air. Curse technique reversal. Red. Boom, a big hole suddenly appeared in the large body of Nu, and then it fell to the ground weakly, turning into a shadow and disappearing. Shintaro's smile widened, as if he had already secured the victory. Kenichi was furious and infused cursed energy throughout his body, and his shadow hands continued to change. Gyokuken, divine dogs. Dado, rabbit escape. Bansho, max elephant. Madoka, round deer. Kongi, piercing ox. Kenichi's use of the 10 shadows technique was extremely proficient, and he used each Shikigami to the extreme. Even though they were weak like frogs and rabbits, they could hold and confuse the enemy. 4 small and medium Shikigami that did not have range attacks. He put them in an unstable state and injected a large amount of cursed energy into them to make them go berserk, thereby expanding their strength and range. But no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't cover the gap in hard power. The Shikigami could not penetrate the absolute defense of infinity. Instead, they were destroyed one by Gojo, Shintaro's blue and red. In the end, only the deer who used the reverse curse technique to heal Kenichi and the ox remained. The ox stepped on the ground and made the final sprint after gathering strength. The further the ox ran, the higher the damage. However, instead of avoiding it, Shintaro faced it head-on. Curse technique lapse. Blue. Shintaro deactivated infinity and simultaneously used blue to pull himself towards the ox. A man and an ox collided head-on, and the resulting powerful cursed energy explosion was astounding, shaking the ground. The tremor was so strong it was felt throughout the Edo region. After the initial shock, the final winner was Gojo Shintaro. Shintaro looked at Kenichi and said, "Admit defeat. After all, this isn't the first time you've lost to me." Kenichi was kneeling on the ground in the middle of the night. The battle had taken a severe toll on him. He touched the deer beside him and released its spell. The ox had been dealt with, so there was no need to try other methods, and it was difficult for him to use any other techniques in his current condition. Kenichi suddenly lifted his head, displaying an unprecedentedly mad expression. Since I can't defeat you, let's die together. Shintaro was shocked. Are you crazy? He knew there was a Shikigami among the 10 Shadows technique that no jujitsu sorcerer from the Zenin family had ever subdued in the past. With this treasure I summon Furub Yuri Yura. Subduing a Shikigami required a subjugation ritual, which could be performed by one person or several people. If completed by one person, the Shikigami could be successfully subdued. If completed by many people, the result would be the ritual simply being cancelled. If the Shikigami in turn killed its participants, the ritual would also be ineffective. At this moment, Kenichi began the final subjugation ritual of the 10 Shadows technique. A large humanoid Shikigami, several meters tall, emerged from the shadows to the ground, with a turntable hanging behind it. The 8-handled sword Divergent Sila Divine General Maharaga appeared. Ha 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 ha. I'll take the first step. You have to work harder. Bang! Maharaga knocked Kenichi down with one blow, his life or death unknown. Maharaga then looked towards Shintaro, stomped on the ground, and charged at him. Shintaro felt Maharaga's powerful strength and murmured, Kenichi, you're even crazier than I am in battle. Curse technique lapse. Blue. He used his old trick again, using Blue's attraction to pull himself towards Maharaga. His speed was so fast, it was indistinguishable from teleportation. Boom! Edo experienced its second earthquake of the day. Maharaga was thrown back, and its chest collapsed. However, Maharaga lay on the ground, and the wheel behind it spun, instantly healing its wound. Shintaro didn't wait for Maharaga to stand and attacked again with the same blow. The third earthquake in Edo. However, this time Shintaro was sent flying through the air like a kite with a broken string. The limit has been breached. Shintaro was greatly surprised. He didn't expect there to be an existence that could penetrate infinity besides nature. His white kimono was stained red with his own blood, and his internal organs were basically torn apart. Fortunately, he could use the reverse curse technique and instantly recover from his injuries. Shintaro looked serious, speculating that this must have something to do with the roulette wheel behind Maharaga. Maharaga charged forward, but this time Shintaro did not dare to confront him, instead maximizing Blue. Maharaga's body was instantly lifted off the ground and pulled into the sky. The ground shattered from the immense pull, and rocks of various sizes began gathering upward, wrapping around Maharaga. Shintaro flew, trying to seize the opportunity to grab the roulette wheel behind Maharaga. However, after Maharaga's struggles were futile, the roulette wheel spun again. Shintaro sensed something was wrong and flew backward. Boom! Large debris exploded in the sky, and Maharaga took advantage of this to land smoothly. This is adaptation. It can adapt to anything. Shintaro's scalp went numb, and under tremendous pressure, his manic fighting spirit emerged. Ha 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 ha! This is amazing. A Shikigami like this. Kenichi, you've really given me a huge surprise. He extended 2 fingers and aimed at Maharaga. Since the enemy could adapt to attacks, use it to defeat him with one strike when it wasn't adapted. The maximum result of the reverse curse technique. Red light condensed in Shintaro's hand, then immediately extinguished. Maharaga was directly hit and thrown by the repulsive force of red, crashing hard against the curtain. Cracks appeared all over the curtain. Maharaga fell to the ground without moving, and Shintaro immediately flew into the sky above Maharaga, launching one powerful attack after another. Those 6 eyes made his cursed energy consumption close to 0, so the mastered Limitless technique could be used almost indefinitely. The ground was covered in dust, and only the red lights were visible, flashing from inside to outside. At that moment, a shot rebounded and hit the edge of the curtain on the other side, causing the curtain to suffer severe damage again. Then the figure that flew out was Shintaro. Maharaga adapted to red, jumped out of the ground, and punched Shintaro. Shintaro flew like this and flew straight to the other side of the curtain. It seems I can only try that trick. He couldn't hide his excitement, even though his face was covered in blood. In the Gojo family, There was a trick that circulated only among the family's top members, because no one had actually used it. This move was called purple. The principle of purple was to combine the negative infinites of the limitless technique with the positive infinites of the reverse curse technique, causing the two to conflict, thus realizing the concept of movement and reversal into reality. However, the consequences of combining two infinities were unpredictable and extremely difficult, so this trick only existed in theory. And he was about to realize it. Shintaro extended his whole palm and said with a smile, "If I fail, I will die." A massive cursed energy gathered in his hand, and the two infinite forces with very different properties began to collide. Hollow technique. Maharaga charged forward again. As Maharaga approached, Shintaro said, "It seems I've failed. Let's die together. Ha ha ha." Maharaga pierced Shintaro's body with the sword of extermination in its hand. But at this moment, the massive energy generated by the collision between infinites and infinites was out of control. Maharaga was so terrified that it immediately retreated several meters. With a loud noise, a strange black light emerged from within, instantly swallowing Shintaro silently. Then, the black light transformed into a purple light intertwined with red and blue. The purple light destroyed everything around it, including Maharaga, Kenichi lying on the ground, the curtain, and a vast area within the curtain. The transparent curtain was also destroyed. Tokugawa Hidetada and the others were thrown to the ground by the airwaves, and everyone was terrified. After a long time, Tokugawa Hidetada asked, "Is it over?" A samurai replied, "The head of the Gojo family seems to have died together with the head of the Zenin family." In the middle of the night, Shintaro woke up from his dream. "I'm not dead." 43. The awakening of Limitless technique one night. Shintaro suddenly recalled his past life and the reason he came to this world. "The uncontrolled infinity is what brought me to another world." Then he discovered the cause of his amnesia, which was the damage to his soul during the cross-world journey. The memory recovery now must be due to the healing of his soul wounds. If that's the case, he remembered something and immediately extended his hand. Like a conditioned reflex, his brain executed a technique from his previous life, the Limitless technique. Shintaro went to the bathroom, stood under the shower, and turned on the water valve, letting the water flow down. Droplets of water gathered in the air around him and slid down, but could not touch him at all. Sure enough, infinity can be used in this world. Shintaro couldn't help but feel a bit excited. After all, this was what he relied on in his previous life. Even in this world, infinity would surely become one of the strongest abilities. The principle of infinity was extremely complex, and even the Gojo family members could only explain part of it superficially. Shintaro's understanding of infinity in his previous life was relatively shallow. He only knew that its normal use was for stopping power, attraction, and repulsion. However, at the ninja school, Shintaro learned mathematics and understood the concept of infinity in a mathematical sense, giving him a clearer understanding of infinity than in his previous life. Infinity itself could make all objects close to it converge infinitely without actually touching it. The speed of an object trying to touch itself would slow down until it stopped. This is where the stopping power comes from. By enhancing this tendency of getting closer, he could achieve negative infinity, thus creating a strong attraction. This is the origin of blue. Red is a bit more complicated. To master it, he had to learn the reverse curse technique first. These two seemingly similar things are actually not the same type at all. Cursed energy is generated by negative emotions such as resentment and sadness. So, it is a type of negative energy. This negative energy can be used to produce various effects, but it cannot be used to heal injuries. Healing injuries contradicts the nature of negative energy. Therefore, it is necessary to transform negative energy into positive energy in a way similar to negative to positive conversion. This operation is called the reverse curse technique. This is why the reverse curse technique can heal injuries. It sounds very simple, but in reality, it is so difficult that very few people master it. And by injecting the positive energy generated by the reverse curse technique into the innate technique, the effect of red can be obtained. Red transforms infinite negative energy into infinite positive energy. The effect changes from attraction to repulsion. After testing, Shintaro successfully used the Limitless technique in this world. However, this was limited to basic usage, and he could not yet use blue or red. But he was quite satisfied. At least he was stronger in this life compared to when he was the same age in his previous life. Shintaro then returned to bed and continued sleeping. The next day, Shikaku appeared at Shintaro's house early in the morning. Shintaro had just finished washing and opened the door after noticing him. Shikaku's hand was hanging by the door. Then he put it down and smiled, saying, "We have a mission today. We will meet at the village entrance in half an hour." Shintaro immediately agreed, and Shikaku turned and left. After he closed the door, Shikaku turned and stopped. Shintaro opened the door again and asked, "Is there something else?" Shikaku shook his head and left. "Indeed, this child is very sharp. Does it have something to do with his eyes? They are suitable for this mission." Half an hour later, at the Konoha gate, Shikaku said to Shintaro, Kurenai, and Asuma, "This mission is to go to the Land of Waves to survey the terrain. It's a task from the geologists of the Land of Fire. The mission level is C. Coincidentally, I have some free time this time, so I'll go with you." Asuma crossed his arms and joked, "I almost forgot that we have a teacher." Shikaku waved his hand and said, "Don't blame me. I was very busy before, not because of the missions your father gave me. Go and say some good words to your father later, and give me fewer tasks. I'm happy to do these low-level boring tasks with you all. At least I won't be in danger. I don't want my wife to become a widow." Asuma didn't seem to have a good relationship with his father, so he didn't respond to Shikaku's words. Kurenai broke the current silence and said expectantly, "What is the Land of Waves like? This is my first time going abroad for a mission. It's just a small island. It's been isolated overseas for a long time and is very poor." Shikaku answered honestly. This made Kurenai complain disappointedly. "Well, that geologist is really boring. What needs to be investigated in such a country?" Shikaku explained seriously, "That's why it's only a sea-level mission. If we were to survey the Land of Fire, it might take several years. That would definitely be an A-level mission." Kurenai nodded, having no expectations for this mission. However, some doubts arose in Shintaro's heart. He didn't quite believe what Shikaku said. From the fact that Shikaku found them this morning, this mission wasn't easy. If it were just a simple sea-level mission, he wouldn't have called them all in the morning due to his lazy personality. Moreover, a jonin is very valuable when a local war breaks out. How could he accompany them to a small country to complete such a boring task? There must be something hidden here. At the same time, on the coast of the Land of Waves, a small boat had just docked. For people disembarked from the boat, 3 men and 1 woman, and the girl was clearly still young. The girl had beautiful reddish-brown long hair, green eyes, and looked very sweet. But the 3 men seemed to respect the girl. The girl stretched, then turned around and said, "Ayo, I'm going to play for a bit." Before the jonin named Ayo could answer, the 2 brown-haired ninjas beside him extended their hands to stop her. "Miss, this place is not as safe as in the village." The girl frowned and said, "What danger could there be? Now this island is full of our people. Could it be that I could still be kidnapped by Konoha? It's not impossible to tie me up, as long as a handsome guy comes to tie me up." The 2 ninjas wanted to say something, but the girl shook her head, her long hair fluttering back. Okay, I won't run too far." After saying that, the girl took off and ran, leaving the 3 of them. The jonin named Ao had short blue hair that was tied up and earring-like talismans hanging from his ears. The forehead protector on his forehead was very different from Konoha's forehead protectors, with 4 wavy lines symbolizing water mist. That was the emblem of Kirigakure village in the Land of Water. 44. Mission in the Land of Waves the next afternoon. The 3 of them arrived at a port in the Land of Fire. Trade in the Land of Fire was flourishing, so there were many ships at the port and more passengers coming and going. Thus, Shikaku found an empty boat and set off. However, shortly after, he regretted his decision. The boatman was an old man, and although he rowed the boat hard, its speed was still very slow. Based on this pace, Shikaku worried they wouldn't reach the Land of Waves until nightfall. And if it weren't for the ongoing peace between the Land of Fire and the Land of Waves, the safety of this boat might not have been guaranteed. Shikaku approached and said, "Old man, can you row faster? The sea may not be calm at night, so we better move quickly." As the old man rowed hard, he turned and said, "I can't meet your expectations. This is already my fastest speed." Shikaku then called Asuma over and said, "Let my student help." Asuma looked reluctant, but couldn't refuse, so he had to step forward. The old man then let go of the oars and handed them to Asuma. He warned, "Just keep rowing straight ahead." Asuma had no choice but to take on the role of a laborer and swing the oars, though his speed was indeed much faster than the old man's. The old man looked at Shikaku for a moment and said, "Are you a ninja? I didn't notice it at first. No wonder this young man is so strong." Shikaku smiled and said, "Yes, we are ninjas from Konoha village. This time, we are going to the Land of Waves to explore the terrain and complete a geologist's task." Hearing this, the old man laughed and said, "Well, what a scholar. The Land of Waves is so small that one can walk around it twice in a day. You could just come and walk around it twice yourself, but you insist on coming." Shikaku smiled and said, "Perhaps it's because a scholar's time is more valuable. By the way, old man, has anything special happened in the Land of Waves recently?" The old man asked confusedly, "Hasn't the Land of Waves always been like that? When you said you were going to the Land of Waves, I wondered why anyone would want to go there lately. It's remote, poor, and there are no bridges, so few people are willing to go there. As for any special circumstances, old man, I really don't know. After all, there shouldn't be any ninjas in a small place like the Land of Waves." Seeing that he couldn't obtain any information, Shikaku smiled politely and sat back in the boat. He found Shintaro staring at him, so he nodded slightly at him. If Shintaro had had any doubts when a few people left the village, it was now certain that there was something wrong with this mission. Shikaku had been in a hurry since they set off, and even asked Asuma to row the boat to reach the Land of Waves earlier, claiming it was for safety reasons. But all three of them were Chunin, and they wouldn't drown even if the boat capsized. Combined with Shikaku's recent behavior of deceiving the old man, Shintaro was very sure there was something wrong with this mission. At dusk, the group arrived at the shore. Shikaku paid the old man the original fare, which made the old man very grateful. The first thing to do upon arriving in the Land of Waves was to find a place to stay. After all, the Land of Waves was small, but if they conducted a thorough survey according to the mission requirements, it would still take a week. So finding a place to stay was necessary. Shikaku then began giving assignments. "It's late today. Asuma, find a hotel with available rooms. Shintaro and Kurinai, investigate the terrain in the city, and I will go check outside the city." Shikaku and the others stood outside the only city in the Land of Waves, looking a bit conspicuous and attracting the attention of some passersby. He took out the survey book and seemed ready to start surveying potential buyers outside the city. Shintaro and Kurinai entered the city, and Asuma went ahead to start looking for suitable accommodation. Kurinai said, "Let's start investigating too." Shintaro looked a bit careless because he knew that the so-called exploration investigation was just a cover. However, he still cooperated with Kurinai and said, "All right, let's split up. You go to the east of the city, I'll go to the west of the city, and we'll meet here in half an hour." Kurinai nodded, and they both began exploring the city area. Shintaro held the terrain survey book and observed the people around him. Most of the civilians here were relatively thin, indicating that this country was indeed very poor. However, there were some ninjas mingled among the civilians, and their strength was generally not weak. Since Shintaro arrived here, he had found no fewer than 10 ninjas in this city, all with strength at the Chunin level. Whenever he encountered a ninja, he pretended to observe the terrain and acted as if he didn't notice them. In fact, he had the 6 eyes and could see through even the best disguised ninjas at a glance. And those ninjas clearly noticed Shintaro. Some of the more vigilant ones followed and observed him for a while, then left after confirming he wasn't a threat. At this moment, Shintaro's attention was drawn to a girl. The girl had long reddish-brown hair and very beautiful green eyes. However, this wasn't the main point of his interest. The main point was that Shintaro saw with his 6 eyes that the chakra in the girl's body seemed different from the chakra of everyone else he had ever seen. Shintaro immediately thought of the possibility of Kekkai Genkai. Kekkai Genkai often change a person's chakra attributes, allowing them to use special ninjutsu beyond the 5 basic attributes. This was common knowledge in the ninja school, and the girl in front of him matched the characteristics of Kekkai Genkai. And the girl should be about his age, but she was very strong and could rival a jonin. Shintaro had seen such high talent in Konoha with Kakashi. The girl also noticed Shintaro's gaze. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at him, and she immediately came over to greet him. "Hello, handsome boy. Are you a Konoha ninja? You're amazing," the girl said while calmly trying to hold his hand, but Shintaro brushed it off. "I am a Konoha ninja. What do you want?" Shintaro asked calmly. The girl pouted and complained, "Don't be so cold. I just came to say hi. By the way, why are you here?" Shintaro looked at the girl and said, "That's none of your business." However, the girl opened the book in his hand and said, "Terrain survey? You should have told me earlier. I'm very familiar with this place. Do you want to come with us?" Shintaro still refused. The girl was very reluctant and kept chatting with him. Eventually, Shintaro walked a half circle around the small town and returned to the agreed meeting point. He said, "Having a conversation like you will never work." The girl wondered, "Why?" "Because I'm not pretty enough," Shintaro replied. "Because you'll scare others away." The girl pinched her cute little face and wondered, "Am I really that scary?" However, when the girl looked up, she saw he had already left. When she saw Kurenai next to Shintaro, she understood why the other party was so cold now. Shintaro and Kurenai met and then went to find Asuma together. Kurenai asked, "Who was that girl with you earlier?" "I don't know," Shintaro answered honestly. Kurenai asked again, "You really don't know her?" "I really don't know her. I don't even know her name." Shintaro still didn't lie. Kurenai then gave up and said nothing more. She just gently patted Shintaro and said, "It's all because you're so handsome." At this moment, the girl heard the conversation between Shintaro and Kurenai, and her anger suddenly rose. After a while, she said, "Humph, I'll make sure you remember my name, you smelly Uchiha boy." The girl clearly saw the Uchiha Clan emblem on Shintaro's back. 45. Danger approaches Asuma, found a suitable hotel, booked individual rooms, and met Shintaro and Kurenai on the street. The 3 of them then went outside the city to find Shikaku. Seeing that it was getting dark, Shikaku ended the day's exploration and took them back to the city to find a restaurant for dinner. At night, they each returned to their rooms to rest. 2 hours later, Shintaro noticed that Asuma and Kurenai were asleep, so he went out and knocked on Shikaku's door. It turned out that Shikaku had not locked the door since he had just returned to his room. "Come in, the door is for you." Shikaku's voice came from inside, so Shintaro entered and closed the door. "I knew you would come to see me. When did you notice?" Shikaku asked with a smile. Shintaro said, "I noticed something yesterday morning." Shikaku nodded and said, "That's why I never treat you like a child. Tell me, what did you find?" Shintaro shared his speculation. "I found more than 10 ninjas in the city. They were hidden among the civilians and seemed to have a specific agenda. Moreover, I also discovered a Kekkai Genkai ninja. Seeing that most of these ninjas have water-attributed chakra, I believe they are from Kirigakure, known for families proficient in water attributes. On the surface, this mission is a C-rank task to explore the terrain. In reality, it's to investigate these Kirigakure ninjas' movements and objectives." Shikaku couldn't help but applaud him and said, "Excellent. Your eyes are quite useful." Hearing this, Shintaro immediately tensed and said, "Sensei, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Only realized this through my sensory ninjutsu." Shikaku smiled and said, "It seems you're not lying. Even if you said your Sharingan mutated, I would believe it more. There's no sensory ninjutsu where eyes shine when used." Shintaro was shocked inside. He didn't expect his 6 eyes, which he relied on since time travel, to be detected by someone. Shikaku continued, "Actually, if you hit it consciously, most people wouldn't be able to detect it. I only found out because I'm your teacher and have more frequent contact with you. Shintaro nodded, mentally impressed by the other party's intelligence, and said, Sensei, please don't tell anyone else. Shikaku jokingly said, If I reveal it, you won't kill me to silence me, will you? Seeing Shintaro quickly shaking his head, he stopped joking and said, I have no intention of revealing your little secret, but I do need your help this time. There are at least 10 more Kirigakure ninjas outside the city, and likely a Jonin among them. You can guess my mission, indeed disguised as a C-rank mission to investigate Kirigakure's movements. It is actually an A-rank mission. However, given the current situation, the mission difficulty will likely escalate, and I'm afraid it may reach S rank. We're actually surrounded by Kirigakure ninjas, but the pretense of a C-rank mission makes it difficult for them to act openly. If they discover our true objective, we might all be buried here. Our initial investigation plan, now, seems too risky. I have to rely on your keen eyes to investigate secretly. Don't worry, I'll ensure you receive A rank or even S rank mission rewards. Shintaro clearly said, no problem. Shikaku instructed, don't tell the others about the real mission. The fewer people who know, the safer we are. Shintaro replied, understood. Shikaku then sent him back to his room. Late at night, outside the city, a group of ninjas stood behind the girl from earlier in the day, including the girl herself, making 7 in total. Miss, it seems there's nothing wrong with those Konoha ninjas. We might get punished for acting recklessly like this. The girl crossed her arms confidently and said, that's because your brains aren't working properly and you didn't see it. Anyway, I know those Konoha ninjas are here to sabotage our plans, so we must go and teach them a lesson. Another ninja asked, what are your orders, miss? The girl said, go and kidnap the Konoha Kunoichi, interrogate her, and see how the Konoha ninjas react. Then we'll know their purpose here. As long as there are no casualties, it's not a big deal. By the way, especially don't harm the white-haired Uchiha. I'll handle him myself. The ninjas behind her moved out and headed towards the city. The girl clenched her fists and muttered to herself, I'll make sure you remember my name, you smelly Uchiha. The ninjas arrived at the hotel and approached the front desk for information. The receptionist was so sleepy that he had dozed off, but was suddenly startled by several fierce ninjas demanding information. Terrified, he immediately pleaded for mercy and revealed all the information about Shintaro and the others. The Kirigakure ninjas went straight to Kurenai's room, broke in, drugged her into unconsciousness, wrapped her in a blanket, and escaped through the window, quickly heading out of the city. Shintaro and Shikaku reacted instantly, waking up from their sleep. Shintaro rushed to Kurenai's room, found it in disarray and Kurenai missing. Just as he was about to dash out, he bumped into Shikaku. Shikaku glanced inside the room and understood what had happened. Without speaking, they exchanged serious looks. Shikaku knocked on Asuma's door and forcefully woke him up. Shintaro rushed downstairs, grabbed the front desk clerk by the collar and demanded, did someone just come here asking for our information? The receptionist trembled and said, why yes, there were some fierce ninjas asking for your information. So you gave it to them. Shintaro was furious. The receptionist was so scared his legs gave out, and he knelt, pleading, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. At this moment, Shintaro didn't realize his blue eyes had turned red, with dark magatama appearing in them. Shintaro, don't get too excited. Shikaku immediately stopped him and then analyzed, calm down and think carefully. We didn't reveal any weaknesses, so the Kirigakure ninjas should only be testing us. Kurenai will be fine. After hearing the analysis, Shintaro sighed, released the receptionist's collar, and calmed down slightly. However, he was still worried about Kurenai and said, let's chase them. They shouldn't have gone far. Shikaku patted his shoulder to reassure him. Then the 3 of them set off together, quickly pursuing the Kirigakure ninjas. Shintaro believed that Kurenai's accident was likely due to a mistake in his own investigation. Therefore, the feeling of self-blame and concern for Kurenai made someone usually calm like him feel nervous for a moment. However, during the pursuit, Shintaro calmed down and began reviewing his entire investigation process, not finding any flaws. Suddenly, he thought of a figure. Could it be that woman? 46. My name is Terumi. May the three men quickly chased outside the city. Shintaro caught a glimpse of the girl, so he said to Shikaku and Asuma, that woman might be the culprit. I'll handle her, and you keep pursuing the others. He seemed to have taken on the role of captain for a moment. However, no one would notice this in a crisis, and Shikaku and Asuma continued to chase the Kirigakure ninjas ahead. Shintaro immediately turned and headed towards the girl. When the girl saw this, she smiled and ran into the forest behind her. Shintaro knew it was a trap, but had to pursue her. The girl slipped into the forest and quickly disappeared, but she couldn't hide from the six eyes. Shintaro ran directly to where the girl was. Suddenly, a large net fell from the sky to trap him. However, he anticipated this and fired a fireball that burned the net to ashes. The girl pursed her lips and said, as expected, a net collected from fishermen's boats is unreliable. Shintaro jumped while running, just in time to avoid a large pit and a trap covered by leaves in front of him. This surprised the girl. Suddenly the girl noticed the Magatama in Shintaro's eyes. Oh, so it's the Sharingan. The girl attributed the reason to the Sharingan. Shintaro approached the girl and asked, you brought me here without setting fatal traps. What do you want? The girl pointed at him with her hands on her hips and said, don't think I don't know what you Konoha ninjas are trying to do here. We're just here on a mission. What are our intentions? Shintaro said confidently. The girl couldn't pretend anymore and said, I don't know either. I was just talking nonsense to trick my subordinates into acting with me. Shintaro then knew that his confident pretense earlier was effective, and he had tricked this girl. He then said, it's natural for us Konoha ninjas to come to the land of waves to complete our mission, but one of our comrades was kidnapped by you Kirigakure ninjas. Do you want to provoke a war between Konoha and Kirigakure? Shintaro's momentum was strong, and the girl, feeling guilty, was overwhelmed by it. The girl quickly explained, do not talk nonsense. I thought you were handsome and wanted to take you back to the village and scare the female ninjas there. Shintaro was speechless. He knew he had been so anxious that his Sharingan opened after Kurenai was kidnapped, but now the other party was telling him that it was just to scare him. Then your goal failed. I won't go to Kirigakure with you, and my teacher and friend have already gone to rescue Kurenai. The girl nodded and said, so her name is Kurenai. So what's your name? Are you listening to me? Shintaro asked with a frown. The girl chuckled and said, I heard you. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. There are 3 Jonin and more than 20 Chunin there, and I am very strong. So what's your name? Shintaro felt that the girl in front of him had a strange temperament, so he replied, my name is Uchiha Shintaro. The girl immediately responded, my name is Terumi Mei. You should remember it. Terumi then formed a seal with her hands and exhaled a thick mist that filled the entire forest. I heard the elders of my family talk about the power of the Sharingan, but Kirigakure Jutsu is very capable of restraining your Sharingan. If you still lose to me, just follow me back to the village. I won't mistreat you. Shintaro smiled and said, I admit you are very strong, but compared to me, you are still far behind. Ftan, son of Bakuri. Shintaro then wanted to use wind release to clear the thick mist, but as soon as he dispersed some of it, Terumi replenished it. You will bear the consequences of underestimating me, Uchiha Shintaro, said Terumi. Seeing this, Shintaro abandoned his intention to clear the thick mist. Instead, he used 6 eyes to directly locate Terumi in the midst of the thick mist. In terms of field of vision, 6 eyes surpassed the Sharingan. Katan, Geiki no Jutsu. Shintaro spat out a great fireball directly at Terumi. Suiton, Sujinch. Terumi spat out a large column of water, blocking the fireball. Can't you see me? She couldn't believe the other party could lock onto her position in the thick mist and moved within the mist. Katan, Geiki no Jutsu. An extraordinary fireball hit again, once again accurately covering Terumi's area. Suiton, Sujinch. Terumi easily blocked the attack again, thinking, he really can detect me. What's going on? Unable to figure out the reason after meditating, she stopped worrying about it and immediately used her special skills. Iton, Ikai no Jutsu. Terumi's hand seal released a large pool of highly corrosive, thick yellow acid, and at the same time, she used her position to create an acid circle around Shintaro. Then, she formed another seal and used her other Kekii Genkai. Futten, Kimono Jutsu. She was a ninja with 2 Kekii Genkai. Terumi took advantage of Shintaro being trapped in the acid and used high-temperature acid mist to completely block the other party's movements. She then stepped on a large tree and leaped into the air, forming a seal with her hands. Suetun, Reizwuridin. Terumi spat out a water dragon from her mouth, diving towards Shintaro. Shintaro, trapped in the midst of the acid liquid and acid mist, had no way out and could only let the attack hit. Boom! Under the influence of the great water flow, Shintaro fell to the ground unconscious. Seeing this, Terumi retracted her chakra, and the thick mist dissipated. She then controlled the concentration of the acid mist and retracted it as well. After doing this, she crossed the chasm she created and came to Shintaro's side, but immediately realized something was wrong. Because the other party wasn't even wet, Terumi screamed inwardly that she had been deceived. However, from close range, she was immediately restrained by Shintaro and had no time to react. Shintaro grabbed Terumi's slender and beautiful neck, pressed a kunai to her throat, and said, "You lost." Terumi asked like a curious baby, "How could you find me in the mist? How could you hurt me by accident just now?" Shintaro had no intention of answering. Instead, he simply guided Terumi to the place where the trap had just been set, removed a hemp rope, and tied her hands. Terumi cooperated, but complained that the hemp rope was too thick and would scratch her skin. So Shintaro loosened it a bit humanely, then said, "Let's go, I want to use you to exchange for my friend." He controlled Terumi carefully to ensure she wouldn't escape. "Friend? Not your girlfriend?" Terumi teased. "Not yet," Shintaro replied. Terumi nodded, then suddenly turned and kissed Shintaro, just in time to kiss his cheek. "She's never kissed you, has she? Then your first kiss will be mine," Terumi said proudly. Shintaro wiped his face and said, "You're truly interesting, Terumi May." 47. Water and Fire. "Hey, you finally remember my name," Terumi said with a smile. "What's the purpose of your visit to the land of waves?" Shintaro changed the topic and asked casually. Terumi replied, "Although I'm beautiful, I'm not stupid. If I reveal something like that, I'll be punished by the village. It seems you have nothing to do with it." Shintaro lamented. "Don't worry about the details," Terumi said, shaking her head. Shintaro then took a closer look at her appearance and found that Terumi was indeed beautiful. Her looks and beauty were different, but comparable to Kurenai. The next time we meet might be on the battlefield. Although Shintaro did not know what Kirigakure was specifically planning, he could deduce that it must have something to do with the ongoing war in the ninja world. "In that case, the next time we meet, I won't hide from you. You need to be careful," Shintaro said. "Don't worry, you can't hurt me." Terumi was slightly uncertain, but since she was still tied up by him, she could only endure it. After a moment, she sighed again. "This war is too cruel. It even forces me and a handsome guy to kill each other. Let's go quickly. I don't want anything to happen to my friend." Shintaro changed the topic again. Terumi looked at him deeply, then sighed and said, "That girl is really lucky. Forget it, just untie me. I'll follow you. You could tie me up again when we get there." Shintaro agreed after hearing this and thanked her softly. "No need to thank me. I'm the cause of all this," Terumi said lightly. In a natural bay in the land of waves, a group of people faced each other. Shikaku and Isuma stood together. In front of them were many Kirigakure ninjas. Kirigakure ninjas kidnapped a Konoha ninja without reason. "Do you want to start a war?" As soon as Shikaku opened his mouth, he used the provocation of war to pressurize the opponent and gain momentum. Ao looked at the tied-up Kurenai and asked the Kirigakure ninjas what happened. The Kirigakure ninja replied, "Miss Terumi's request. She thought something was wrong with the Konoha ninja, so we captured one and brought her back for interrogation." Ao sighed, then said to Shikaku, "We didn't intend to provoke a war. But the ninja from your village must have done something to interfere with our mission. So our ninjas were forced to do this. Forced? I think you're quite proactive. We just arrived in the land of waves, and something like this happened on the first day. Shikaka became angry. What mission requires your village to gather troops in another country? Are you really going to launch a surprise attack? Ao denied. There's no such thing at all, but the mission is confidential, so I have no comment. Just as negotiations reached a stalemate, Shintaro arrived with Terumi tied up. Kirigakure ninjas, your people are in our hands now. If you didn't intentionally provoke a war, then we will exchange hostages so we can live in peace. If not, don't blame me for being ruthless. Shintaro said, pressing the kunai hard against Terumi's neck, even causing a bleeding mark. Sorry, please be patient, he said softly from behind Terumi. Terumi nodded slightly, then started shouting, help me. Several of Terumi's family members among the Kirigakure ninjas immediately panicked. If Terumi died, they wouldn't need to return to Kirigakure, and it would be easier to jump into the sea. They quickly asked Ao to exchange hostages. Ao had no choice but to say, exchange at the same time and never retreat. Shintaro swore, exchange at the same time. Then he walked forward with Terumi and faced the Kirigakure ninja, carrying the still unconscious Kurenai wrapped in a blanket. Goodbye. After saying this, Shintaro pushed Terumi to the Kirigakure ninja side, and the Kirigakure ninja threw Kurenai to Shintaro. Shintaro caught Kurenai and held her. Kurenai opened her eyes sleepily. It's Shintaro. I dreamed of you again. She then closed her eyes again. Holding Kurenai in his arms, Shintaro felt calm. Ao said to Shikako, there must be a misunderstanding this time. Konoha and Kirigakure live in peace and would never do anything to harm each other. Shikaku also said, yes, we believe Kirigakure, as one of the 5 great ninja villages, wouldn't do anything disgraceful like that. His smile and words always brought a strange feeling. However, it wasn't easy for Ao to do anything to Shikaku. Both countries were in a special period, and certain actions could easily escalate conflicts. At least for now, Kirigakure wasn't ready for war. Therefore, although Kirigakure had an absolute numerical advantage, they could only let Shintaro and the others go. At the same time, Ao sent people to take a boat back to Kirigakure to report the situation. Just say that Konoha has learned our deployment and ask for instructions for the next step. Ao sighed. He originally came to the land of waves to verify the feasibility of the water country strategy to use the route to attack the fire country. But something like this happened. He didn't know how the senior management of Kirigakure would react to this. At the hotel, Shintaro apologized to the receptionist for the trouble he had caused. The receptionist didn't dare accept his apology at all. Shikaku took out a stack of banknotes and said, this is compensation for the hotel. It seemed the receptionist hadn't seen that
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.